This boy was the son of the greatest hero, but he was treated like a failure. His name was Seungyeon Gi. He couldn't get into the academy for the gifted because his power was chains, something everyone called useless. His life was a failure. Then suddenly, his sister woke up from a coma and awakened a divine power, but he kept training in the rain until he realized his chains weren't meant to restrain enemies. They were meant to drag monsters straight into the abyss. And so he entered the academy and began destroying all the awakened. A hunter tells everyone to hold on, wondering if it's just him, or if this raid was truly impossible no matter what they did. They desperately ask about reinforcements, but it's already too late for that. Suddenly, a voice cuts through the chaos, telling everyone to get out of the way. Then, a brutal red attack completely obliterates the creature. The other hunters freeze, recognizing who has just arrived. The group's streamer, excited, asks his live audience if they're seeing this. It was Shinbaek Gi, the legend known as the hunter who hunts other hunters. The streamer films everything, saying it's the first time he's ever seen him in person. The scene shifts to his son, who thinks of his father as a family myth. He complains, wondering what kind of father just disappears on graduation day. A friend walks up and asks why he's just spacing out all alone. The friend asks about his parents, but he says neither of them could make it. The friend then asks if he can take a quick picture of them with his family. He takes out his phone and frames his friend, who's smiling with his parents. With a click, he takes the picture, hiding how he truly feels. As it turns out, his father was away handling important business, and meanwhile, his poor mother couldn't attend either. She was taking care of his older sister, who was in a coma, as always. It had been 12 long years, every single day without a break. When he gets home, he finds his mother and calls out to her in a low voice. He asks where she was today, and she apologizes, but he explodes, yelling that she couldn't take a single day off. He keeps complaining about his sister, until a voice tells him to keep it down. Suddenly, his father appears in the living room, leaving the boy completely shocked. The father asks how he dares to yell at his mother, making the atmosphere heavy. The boy just clicks his tongue and turns his back on his father, filled with anger. But his father stops him, asking where he thinks he's going with that attitude. He questions his son's decision, saying they've already talked about this many times. His father says he wasn't made to be a hunter, and that he should just give up. The scene changes to the training academy, where he angrily dodges a strike. The academy's owner, Juyong Lee, remarks that someone seems pretty pissed off today. With that, the two continue their training, exchanging heavy blows with wooden swords. Seungyeon then retreats at an incredible speed, creating some distance between them. He then summons a blue mana chain, leaving his master very surprised. He leaps and throws the chain with all his might, trapping his opponent's sword. The master seems to have been caught, looking at the chain that ensnared him, but with a surge of energy, he shatters the chain into pieces, shocking the boy. Juyong lunges forward and lands a powerful blow, knocking the boy to the ground instantly. He stands over him, admitting with a smile that he was almost caught. Lying on the ground, Seungyeon is told that his chain is weaker than something from a discount store. The master even taunts him, saying he might fight better without using his powers. The scene shifts to a Chinese restaurant, with the master telling the boy to take a break. Seungyeon complains, saying he doesn't feel right eating on the dime of a bankrupt academy. The master informs him they'll train more after lunch, which confuses the boy. Outraged, he shouts, asking how he can possibly relax while waiting for the results to come out. He explains that he faced incredibly strong people who could shoot fire and destroy everything. Compared to them, he felt like trash and says he'll never become a hunter. He thinks that if he wants his father to notice him, he needs to do something. Dejected, he concludes that he has to get a move on and fix his situation, but his master interrupts him, telling him not to say such things. He advises the boy, saying that a family should be a place of peace. The scene changes to a rainy day, with a man giving an angry speech. We learn that it's been a century since monsters arrived on Earth. The man talks about the returnees, people who have come back from other worlds. He then screams into the microphone, making his thoughts on these people crystal clear. The speech declares that this was never their home, and it never will be. As he speaks, his master's words about having a peaceful home echo in his mind. While the man yells for the returnees to leave, his phone vibrates. On the screen, a text message informs him that he has been rejected from the Hunter Academy. Reading the message in the rain, he thinks hatefully, "To hell with them all!" His master's voice echoes in his head, and he throws his phone to the ground in a rage. He screams that every new day on this planet is already a hell of its own. He continues, saying that if they're looking for a place for the lost, they've already found it. Utterly defeated, he sits down on the sidewalk, not caring about the heavy rain. But suddenly, the broken phone starts vibrating, showing a call from his mother. He picks the device up from the ground and answers the call, still confused. Over the phone, he hears a piece of news that leaves him in total shock. The scene changes to the hospital, where a doctor says what happened is unprecedented. The doctor explains that after 12 years in a coma, all her vital signs are excellent. His mother, crying with joy, calls him over with an emotional voice. She asks him to go say hi to his sister, who had finally woken up. In a flashback, The mother says his sister can't be scared and needs her family. She suggests he could take turns with her, but he complains that he has his own things to do. He yells, saying he doesn't even remember the last time he spoke to his own sister. At that, his father tells him to shut up, while his sister begs them not to fight. His sister pleads with them, making Seungyeon and his mother very worried. She says in a weak voice that she's very scared, still terrified. His mother rushes out of the room to handle something, leaving him speechless. In the end, he felt like he had nowhere to run. He ended up agreeing to spend 3 days a week at the hospital with her. His mother thought this would bring the siblings closer, but the atmosphere was tense, so he would just sit there and read, trying to ignore her presence in the same room. But even so, he couldn't stop training on the street every day. The academy's rejection was still on his mind, motivating him to get stronger. He then heads back to the hospital, thinking none of it would matter in the end. But when he enters the room, the bed is empty and the window is open, startling him. Outside, his sister was sitting alone on a bench in the dark. He runs up, yelling her name, which makes her jump back in fright. He asks what she was thinking, and she says the room felt stuffy. Seeing her like that, he invites her to go with him, saying they won't be long. The two sit on the bench in silence until his sister calls his name. She then asks why he hates her now, leaving the boy completely speechless. The girl explains that he just seems meaner than she remembered. He gets defensive, saying that was 12 years ago, and he doesn't even remember. With a sad look, she just says she figured as much, lowering her head. She vents that everything has changed and she can't even go back to school anymore. Clenching her hands tightly, she wonders what she did wrong. Crying, she says she just woke up one day and was suddenly all alone in the world. The word alone hits him hard, reminding him of his own moments of solitude. He tells her that makes no sense, and that she knows it. He explains that their parents are still there, and he'll always be her brother. He says she's not alone and can make new friends if she wants to. But as he says this, an idea sparks, remembering that his master never graduated either. With a new perspective, he realizes it's still too early to give up on his dream. His sister, a little more relieved, thanks him for his support and his words. He then suggests they go back inside and asks how she got out without her wheelchair. But before he can finish, he realizes his sister is floating in the air with some kind of magic. Shocked, he yells, asking how she's doing that, and she says she learned it in the fairy realm. She explains that's where she went while she was asleep all this time. At that, he remembers the protest about travelers who returned from other worlds, and also his father's words, saying he wasn't cut out to be a hunter. With his sister floating in front of him, he finally understands what was going on. His expression shifts to one of pure terror as he realizes his sister is a returnee. In a flashback, their mother shows up, looking really concerned. She complains that it looks like they've been rolling in the dirt, and they both confirm. Then she says, playtime is over for today because it's bath time, but people always think there will be another day. But the future is completely uncertain, and there's nothing we can do about it. Their life was normal, with their mom always taking care of everything. They would have dinner as a family and then watch TV until they fell asleep on the couch. Lying in bed, the sister was already thinking about what they would play tomorrow. She was so excited she could barely wait for the sun to rise. But that very night, something completely magical and unexpected happened to her. A being of light appears in her room, calling her little friend with a smile. The creature then informs her that she has been summoned to be the savior of that realm. And just like that, she ended up in the fairy realm, where she went on grand adventures. But in the end, she was lost in time for 12 long years to everyone. The doctor then confirms to the parents, explaining that their daughter is a returnee. The agent explains that the bracelet on her arm is meant to contain the powers of the awakened. He then asks her to tell him what the fairies taught her in the other world. She says she learned a little bit of everything, from magic to how to survive there. The man is surprised and asks for more details about their so-called queen. The girl explains that the queen was evil, and to come back she had to teach her a lesson. But the agent interprets this differently, saying she killed the queen to escape. Frightened, she yells that there's no way, that she would never do something like that. The guy doesn't believe her, and says a returnee's abilities are a danger to everyone. He continues, explaining that every returnee who comes back claims to be a hero in another world. Seungyeon, hearing all this, realizes his sister might be as strong as an S-rank hunter, and that no matter how safe the powers seem, they could have changed upon her return. The agent then informs the mother that, from now on, her daughter is forbidden from using magic, and that the next day, a government hunter will be sent to watch the girl. Seungyeon leaves and picks up an envelope, which thanks him for his evaluation, and to his surprise, the results say he passed the test and was accepted into the academy. But the results also stated he was deemed unfit for combat against monsters. His mana streams were too fragile and vanished too quickly, having no effect. Because of this, he was evaluated as an F-rank hunter, the lowest of all. Just then, his sister calls out to him in a very soft voice, trying to break the silence. She finds him sitting alone in the hallway, looking grim. The girl asks if she scared him earlier and says there's nothing to be afraid of. She then promises she's still the same as always, the same sister she was before, but he cuts her off, bluntly telling her to just leave. Confused, she apologizes, but he insists he needs to be alone right now. With a heavy heart, she asks why he's acting this way toward her. She doesn't understand why he he's being so horrible all of a sudden. Then the girl stammers, asking if it's because she's a returnee now. In a burst of anger, he explodes and screams at her to get away from him right now. His sister freezes, completely terrified by his violent and unexpected reaction. With his back to her, he ignores her, leaving the girl alone in the dark hallway. He walks aimlessly down the street, completely lost in his thoughts. The image of his sister, with that frightened look in her eyes, wouldn't leave his mind. Standing in the middle of the sidewalk, he wonders what the hell that was all about. People around him start to whisper, calling him a pathetic bully. A boy nearby even asks his friend what they should do now, but he realizes the crowd isn't just looking at him. There's something else. When he turns around, he sees his father, covered in blood and surrounded by reporters. The scene cuts back to the hospital, where his sister was alone in her room at night. She was looking out the window, while he suffered under the weight of his own words. The girl remembers what her brother used to be like, a happy, smiling little boy. She just wished things could go back to the way they were before. With a heavy heart, she decides to leave and goes to the room's window. Using her powers, she floats over the city, flying far away from the hospital. She then arrives at the abandoned playground, which was their favorite spot. The place that was once full of joy was now completely ruined by time. Crying, she just wanted to turn back time, begging for a second chance. She thinks she's still the same, but two suspicious figures appear behind her. Startled, she yells, asking who's there, and one of them tells her to calm down. The guy then asks if anyone warned her to stay away from this place. He explains that a dungeon break happened here, which is why it's dangerous to walk around at night. They offer to show her the way out, but she refuses, saying she knows the way. But then, a third guy comes up from behind and smacks her on the head with a club. The attacker then warns that she's his, while the others complain about his attitude. One of them grumbles that there's always an idiot who can't wait his turn. Suddenly, the attacker asks what's going on, feeling a strange energy. One of his partners warns, shocked, that the girl is getting up from the ground. With her face bleeding, she wonders what the hell just happened. His friend teases the guy, saying the hit was weak since she barely bled. Seeing them approach, she screams desperately, telling them to stay away. Just then, a new voice emerges and tells them to stop, threatening to shoot if they take another step. The guys mock her, saying she must have escaped from an asylum. At that moment, she remembers a spell book she found in the other world. One of the spells was Sagittarius Ray, and a symbol glows in her eye. It was explained that the arrow was large, but that it wouldn't kill anyone, no matter what. The magic was only meant to turn the targets to stone, to make them sleep for a while. But suddenly, a burst of blood erupts, shocking the attacker. She then remembers the warning, that powers can change upon returning. When she opens her eyes, there's a hole in the man's stomach, and the man falls flat on the ground, with a huge hole in his stomach. Looking at her own stained hands, she doesn't understand what just happened. The scene cuts back to the father, who was holding the streamer, all bloody and injured. In the crowd, people were whispering about the famous YouTube streamer. He then overhears someone wondering if the guy had just died right there. His father was surrounded by the police, while Sungyeon watched from a distance. And on the ground, a body covered by a sheet showed the gravity of the situation. Just then, his father spots him and asks what he's doing there, away from his sister. With his face still stained with blood, he faces his son with a serious look. He then asks if this is the first time his son has seen a dead body. The father replies, 4 out of 10, leaving the boy completely confused. He explains that this was the mortality rate for hunters last year. He continues saying that many get injured or quit because of the trauma. He says that in the end, they're all just meat for the grinder. No exceptions. With a pained look, he asks if this is the world his son wants to live in. The boy is speechless, trying to say something to his father, but his father cuts him off, saying he doesn't have and never had what it takes. Back at the hospital, the night felt heavier and quieter than usual. He stands there, thinking that in the end, his father wasn't entirely wrong. Deep down, he always knew he was like this, kind of weak and without much drive. He knew about his useless power and the brutal world, but he always chose to ignore it. Since he was a kid, he saw his father and the other hunters on TV as great heroes. But now, after everything that happened, he no longer knew what to believe in. The boy feels lost, not knowing what direction to take with his life. Suddenly, he sees a glowing figure in the sky and doesn't understand a thing. It was just his sister, but she was floating, covered in blood and with a pink aura. Her hair was glowing in a strange way with a very sinister energy. Terrified by the scene, he stammers her name in fear. He then shouts, asking whose blood that is all over her clothes. And he continues, demanding to know what the hell she was doing outside the hospital. The agent's voice echoes in his mind, warning of the danger of the returnees. In terror, he tells her to stop and stay away, not recognizing his own sister. With her eyes glowing pink, she screams at him not to get any closer. Her entire body begins to emit a strong, unstable pink energy. An explosion occurs, drawing the attention of everyone at the hospital. An emergency announcement warns that the hospital is under attack by someone. His sister loses control, and a dark portal appears behind her, pulling her in. He yells, asking what she thinks she's doing with all this chaos. But she can only beg him to stop her, unable to control herself. Desperate, she screams that she doesn't want to kill anyone, as the portal sucks her in. He reaches out his hand and she screams for him to stop, but it's already too late. The announcement explains that using powers like this in public is a serious crime, and the penalty for it is to be hunted down and killed without a second thought. He panics, knowing the police will arrive before his father does. An idea strikes him, and he wonders if there's a way he can help. Looking at his own hands, he doubts he has any chance against her. With his useless powers, he knows he can't do anything to save her. He thinks about just leaving, convincing himself that it's not his fault. With his face bleeding, he tells himself there's nothing he can do. A younger, more innocent version of himself appears in his mind, looking at him, but seeing the chaos, a new determination appears in his eyes, changing everything. His sister floats in the air, screaming desperately that she can't take this pain anymore. She says it's not her, that there's nothing she can do to stop this. He then shouts her name, trying to get her attention amidst the chaos. Just then, he charges through the energy bolts, risking himself to get close to her. He yells for her to wake up, to snap out of that crazy trance once and for all. His voice seems to reach her, and she recognizes him for a brief moment. His father's words about being meat for the grinder come rushing back to his mind, but he shouts that he already knows that, and that hunters risk their lives for others. He then asks her to calm down, to try and control herself just a little. He explains they were warned this could happen, and that she just needs to take a deep breath. She wonders why he's risking his life, since she's not even the same person anymore. A voice in her head asks what's wrong with being different from others. In a vision, she remembers her first encounter with the fairy in the other world. The creature says she's a heroine, but the girl strongly doubts it. She cries, saying that here she's nothing, just an adult who lost everything, and that now she's a danger to everyone, blaming herself for the guys from earlier. But the fairy assures her it's not true, that everyone hates her now. With its chains glowing, the creature explains what it takes to be a hero. It's about risking your life to save someone, even when you're terrified. The fairy then says that her home is here, and this is where she truly belongs. As the chaos subsides, he hugs his sister on the ground, surrounded by the police. He holds her tightly in his arms as she cries uncontrollably, relieved. He remembers when he was a child, and deep down, he always knew he could. But suddenly, his father's figure appears among the police officers and calls out to him. From a distance, the newcomers watch, not understanding what the boy just did. We're told something terrible happened, but the police made sure to cover it up. And behind it all, another, even quieter story was unfolding. We see So-yeon alone in her room, a place filled with trash and bloodstains. A guard then opens the cell door, announcing that her visitors have finally arrived. She then walks down a white hallway, escorted by a guard and 2 other people. So-yeon could only think of her mother, who had cried so much during their last visit. She then arrives at the visitation room, unsure of what to say or how to act. Suddenly, she looks up and sees her father, who was staring at her with a very serious expression. The two sit down across from each other, and she nervously tries to speak to her father. But before she can apologize, he interrupts her, saying he's there to get her out. Her father then reveals that a woman read her memories to find out the truth. The scene shows us a flashback of So-yeon fighting with a powerful blue aura. He explains that the attackers struck first, leaving her with no other choice. So-yeon is completely confused by the terms, not understanding what any of it meant. Her father says she did nothing wrong, but she insists that she hurt people. But he calms her down, explaining that the guys are alive thanks to people with healing powers. He finishes by saying that the most important thing is that she didn't kill anyone that day. And So-yeon begins to cry, thanking God and saying she was so relieved. Her father watches her reaction with a thoughtful and somewhat distant look. The scene changes, and the woman with glasses asks Mr. Gi how the conversation went. He replies that it went as well as it could have considering the situation. She informs him he'll have to pay a fine, but he says it's a small price for his daughter's freedom. The woman then asks if he's sure, because the girl will find out the truth one day. She reminds him that the thug his daughter attacked with her power didn't survive. Her father just says he hopes she's prepared when she finds out the whole truth. Then, the woman changes the subject, saying she has something to give him. She hands him some papers, explaining they are some of his daughter's documents. But as he reads, his face fills with rage, and he asks who did this. Furious, he crumples the paper and asks who sent this garbage. The scene cuts to a guy with long hair, casually opening a bag of chips. We then see Sung-yeon unleashing his chain power, his face full of rage. He fires a chain of energy, trying to hit the cans on the target, but he misses again, and the man on the bench scoffs at his miserable failure. Sung-yeon asks his friend who the weird guy is, and he says he has no idea. Ji-hyung then says he has bigger problems, but Sung-yeon shouts that he is the problem. Ironically, the man asks if he's distracting him, and the boy immediately confirms it. He then asks if the kid is going to complain like that to monsters in a real battle. He continues, saying this is nothing compared to the dangers of a real dungeon, and with a smile, he says that if the kid fails, it'll be all on him. Seung-yeon gets annoyed and asks if they know each other from somewhere. He yells that the guy has no idea how much he trains to be saying things like that, but Ji-hyung calmly replies that he's already seen everything he needed to. He turns around and admits the boy is athletic, which really surprises the kid, but adds that he's garbage at mastering the techniques, shocking the boy. Ji-hyung explains that no one taught him about the inner strength that manifests the chains, and he finishes by saying he needs precision, not more useless, raw power. He then asks if the kid wants to see how a professional makes it look easy. Using his power, he flicks a chip through the air, hitting the can with perfect precision. Young's jaw drops, unable to believe what he just saw. He's shocked by the incredible control, since the chip didn't even break. Seung-yeon thinks he knows the guy, who says that he doesn't realize his own potential. He then offers a strange item, saying he wants to test it on the boy's chain. Upon contact, a green light glows and he smiles, as if he's discovered something. Then, he asks if the young man remembers what he did at the hospital that day. He continues, saying he remembers the moment the chain touched his sister. We're shown that the chain nullified the girl's power as if it were nothing. He explains that this ability is unique and that it's the true potential of the chains, but he warns that without learning to control it, his power is useless. Seung-yeon gets irritated with all the talk and asks once and for all who the hell he is. The man then introduces himself as Ji-hyung Chai, a hunter and a teacher at an academy, and with a smile, he says that today, he'll be acting as our hero's recruiter. Seung-yeon is surprised and asks if he's there to recruit him for Seonghan Academy. He says he already failed the test, but Ji-hyung tells him that his recommendation is enough. With a smile, he says the boy earned it, and now he just has to make a choice. He then pressures him, asking if he's going to stand still or come with him. Without a second thought, Seung-yeon shouts that he'll definitely go with him. The boy asks with all his conviction to be taken to the hunter school. Ji-hyung then extends his hand and welcomes his newest freshman, and suddenly a folder flies toward Ji-hyung, who blocks it with another folder. Out of nowhere, Gi appears with a red aura, startling Seung-yeon. Gi glares at Ji-hyung and demands that he explain himself right now. With a furious look, he asks what kind of joke he thinks he's pulling. Ji-hyung, all sweaty and scared, replies that he should be asking him the same thing. Ji-hyung faces the man in the suit, remarking that he needs to take better care of those wrinkles. He continues to mock him, but the man in red tells him to explain himself right now. Seung-yeon wonders if they know each other, and Ji-hyung says it's his job. He explains that he scouts for promising students, like the man's children with their unique powers. Shin-baek then yells that his daughter is a child and won't fit in at a school like that, but Ji-hyung uses his words against him, saying he himself heard she would adapt. He warns that the girl is out of control and could go off at any moment. He insists she needs special training, but her father says the decision is his. Shin-baek thinks the whole idea is a load of nonsense and dismisses the matter with disdain. Then he turns to his son and tells him he simply doesn't have what it takes. He continues, saying that rookies with good intentions always end up paying with their lives. Seung-yeon hears all this and is completely devastated by his father's words, but Ji-hyung shouts that he's wrong and tells him to guess again about the boy. He defends the young man, saying he saw his courage when he risked everything for his sister, and he confronts the father, asking if that isn't the grit a hunter needs. But his father retorts that he doesn't see courage, only pure arrogance. He then asks what made the boy think he could control his sister. Seung-yeon tries to explain, saying that if he hadn't done anything, something bad was going to happen. But Shin-baek says it was all luck, as he had the power to stop her. He questions what will happen when his luck runs out, and what good a corpse is. The father adds that the competition at the academy will chew him up and spit him out. Ji-hyung takes offense and threatens to sue, but Shin-baek just tells him to say hi to the dean. The boy is crushed, wondering why his father has to be this way. He just wanted, for the first time in his life, for his dad to say he was proud. He clenches his fist tightly, thinking about why no one can see his worth. With a lost look in his eyes, he holds his arm, feeling the weight of that humiliation. Just then, his friend comes up from behind, congratulating Seung-yeon on his achievement. Seung-yeon keeps looking at his father with a very sad and dejected expression. Young congratulates Seung-yeon, saying this brings him one step closer to his dream. Seung-yeon is still down, but his friend tells him not to think too much about it. Young sincerely says that he sees him and believes in him. He grabs Seung-yeon's arm, saying he sees the incredible things he's going to achieve, and he also sees all the hard work the boy has already put in to get here. With a determined look, he asks who cares what other people think anyway. He then confronts the boy's father, telling him he knows nothing about his own son. Shin-baek then understands everything, and says he now knows why his son is so obsessed with this. With a furious look, He says his son's friend was the bad influence all along. He accuses Ju-young of filling his son's head with a bunch of nonsense. Suddenly, Sung-yeon slaps himself across the face, shocking everyone. Sung-yeon thanks his friend and says he can see things more clearly now. He then admits his friend is right and that he really used to be like that before. He confesses that at first he just wanted to be like his father someday. He wanted his father's approval, but now he wonders if his dad only saw him as a loser. But he says that on that day at the hospital, something finally shifted inside him. He realizes there was never a reason to be ashamed of who he truly was. And with this newfound certainty, he finally knows which path he wants to follow in life. Sung-yeon then shouts that he's going to be a hunter, even if it makes them enemies. His father hears all of it, with an expression of pure rage on his face. With his eye glowing, he simply says he understands his son's decision. He then says there's no point in trying to convince him, leaving the boy speechless. But suddenly, he tells him to do his best, surprising everyone. Sung-yeon is completely shocked, not understanding his father's unexpected reaction, but he warns that the boy will see that this was never the right path for him. At that, he lays down the first condition. Sung-yeon must join the student council, and he threatens to drag him back home if he fails in less than a year. The second condition is that he must do everything to keep his Soyeon safe. He explains that with her unstable powers, it's better for her to go to the academy too. His task is to make sure she adjusts, or he himself will bring him back. Then he asks if his son accepts the task, and Sung-yeon agrees on the spot. Shin-baek then lets go of the boy, who is visibly relieved by the gesture. Sung-yeon mutters that he thought he was toast, still feeling the fear from that moment. As his father was leaving, Ji-hyung runs up and calls him over to talk a bit more. He questions if the student council condition wasn't a bit too harsh for the kid. Ji-hyung shouts that only the best get in there, and that Sung-yeon doesn't stand a chance. But his father says he should expect it since he wanted to be a hunter. Shin-baek then stops walking and calls Ji-hyung by his name very seriously. He confesses that he never wanted anyone, especially his children, to follow in his footsteps. Ji-hyung is shocked by the revelation, not knowing what to say to him. Time passes, and his sister, So-yeon, receives her special admission letter. And as March arrives, they all head to the academy on a giant ship. The scene changes, and we see Sung-yeon training alone, honing his chain powers. He remembers that in the beginning, he just wanted to be a strong hero like his father. Ji-hyung then thinks that maybe he was the one who lured the boy into this life. And so, the two siblings board the ferry, beginning the journey of their lives. The scene shifts to a flashback, where a little boy asks his mom what's happening. He hugs his mother in fear, wanting to know if the man up there knows they're here. Looking up at the sky, the boy sees the silhouette of a hunter floating amidst the chaos. The mysterious hunter then points at them, releasing a terrifyingly powerful aura. Panicked, the boy screams that a hunter isn't supposed to hurt innocent people. Suddenly, a young man with white hair jolts awake, drenched in sweat from the nightmare. Just then, his roommate appears from the bunk bed and asks if he's okay. The young man explains he doesn't sleep well, while the other jokes about the noises he makes. The roommate notices he's never seen him before and asks if he's one of the freshmen. The guy introduces himself as Pureum's son, a sophomore, and welcomes him aboard. He shakes the upperclassman's hand and awkwardly introduces himself as Subin Seol. The scene shows the ship continuing its journey, sailing across a calm blue sea. In another room, Sung-yeon shows his sister a bunch of knives he took from their dad. His sister panics at the idea, but he tells her to relax and calm down. He scoffs, imagining their dad acting like he's the new captain of the ship now. He then awkwardly announces he's going to explore, but his sister is suspicious. She yells that he'll get lost, saying he's not that dumb to forget his way. Worried, he asks what she would do if a stranger offered her candy. He then sighs, wondering if he's somehow become his sister's babysitter. Looking out the window, he thinks this is nothing compared to what's still to come. The scene shifts to the deck, where a blonde guy is talking about the start of a new semester. He explains that befriending the right freshman makes life a lot easier, but with a serious look, he says it's a mistake to think that's the only reason they're here. Staring at Pureum's son, he warns that the kid is nothing but a newbie in his eyes. Pureum takes the compliment, but nervously asks what the point of all this is. The blonde guy then says that befriending a freshman is great, but it's not enough, and he adds that it's only worth it if he brings girls to the isolated island. He complains that he wants some romance, while Subin introduces Ujin-jeon to the others. Pureum says that was his first mistake, and that's why he was already keeping an eye on someone else. Ujin's cuteness radar goes off when he sees a girl feeding the seagulls. Soyeon tries to give them some chips, wondering if they'd prefer the spicy flavor, but the bag slips from her hand, and the girl panics over her blunder. In the blink of an eye, Ujin appears out of nowhere and catches the chips in a swift move. He then hands the bag back to her with a charming flair, leaving the girl a bit confused. She thanks him and calls him a hero, making the boy's heart race instantly. Ujin tries to be cool and says it was nothing, but she doesn't understand his response. We're told the seafood-flavored chips never made it to the seagull's stomach, but they definitely found a direct path to that poor guy's heart. Worried by the look on his face, she asks if she needs to call a doctor. He then changes the subject, asking if she's new too and what class she's in. From a distance, Subin comments that the pickup line went well, but Purium isn't so sure. He says she's still around, but it doesn't look like it's by choice. Then, Purium explains that Yujin was held back because the academy doesn't mess around with grades, and he adds that many of them paid the full tuition again just for another shot. Subin remarks that those guys must have money to burn, but Purium reminds him that a Sunghan diploma opens a lot of doors, hence the effort. At that moment, Subin has a quick flashback of the strange hunter from his nightmare, and he says seriously that, from what he's seen, not all of them deserve to be called hunters. Purium stays quiet, just watching his friend with a very curious look. Suddenly, he notices Ujin and Soyeon heading to a more hidden spot. He then calls Subin over to check out what those two are up to. The scene cuts back to room 105, where Sungyeon was reading a book peacefully. Suddenly, his sister comes in with Ujin, looking very frightened by the situation. She yells about a dangerous stranger, and that the weirdo gave her chips back. Ujin is completely stunned, shocked at being called a weirdo in front of everyone. She keeps explaining that the guy kept asking if she had a boyfriend. Seungyeon's expression darkens when she says the guy touched her without permission. Outside, Pareum and Subin wonder if he went into her room, but the next second, the door flies open and Ujin is thrown out violently. Ujin, lying on the floor, pleads for calm, saying they can talk things out. But Sungyeon charges at him full force while Purium tries to break up the fight. Subin then arrives, wondering what the hell that idiot Ujin did this time. It's then revealed to everyone that Soyeon was in a coma for 12 long years. At that, Purium grabs Ujin, screaming that the girl is a child and telling him to beg for forgiveness. The scene changes, and they're all sitting in the cabin, with Purium apologizing for the punch. He then asks Seungyeon's age and finds out he's the same age as Subin. With a smile, Subin introduces himself and says it's a pleasure to finally meet him. Seungyeon replies awkwardly, still a bit shaken from the whole commotion. The group then leaves the cabin and starts walking down the ship's hallway together. Purium asks if Seungyeon is in the hunter class, and he confirms it. He also asks which hunter he likes, and he answers that it's probably his dad. Purium gets a little curious, wondering about the probably in his answer. Suddenly, Subin notices his last name and starts putting the pieces together. And he asks point blank if Sungyeon is related to the hunter Shinbek-gi. The memory of that powerful hunter comes rushing back into young Subin's mind. Then, Sungyeon calmly confirms that the famous Shinbek-gi is their father. The guys are in shock, yelling that they can't believe he's his father, but the shock turns to excitement and they say they're the hunter's biggest fans. His name makes Subin's heart pound, reminding him of his childhood trauma. The scene then shows us the imposing figure of Shin Baek, who looked like a god there. Everyone now stares at the siblings, shocked that they are the children of that great hero. Purium mentions that Sungyeon's father used to be his biggest hero. He then reveals that when he was younger, he also dreamed of becoming a hunter. Curious, Sungyeon asks if that means he's not studying for it anymore, but the boy explains he's an engineering nerd, since his E rank prevented him from becoming a hunter. Hearing this, Sungyeon thinks his own case is worse and decides to keep his mouth shut about his F rank, but his sister ends up telling everyone that he got into the hunter's class even with an F rank. The revelation leaves everyone shocked, and Sungyeon panics instantly. He desperately tries to deny it, but his sister confirms it's all true. To shut her up, he grabs the girl's head with both hands. He then messes up all her hair, leaving the poor girl completely dizzy. He shakes her all over the place, yelling at her to keep her trap shut. Purium calls out to him, trying to get his friend to stop the whole scene. He then says the rank doesn't matter, and that with hard work, anyone can be a hunter. Purium stays quiet for a moment, just watching Seungyeon with a slight smile, and Subin seems to appreciate his words, showing a new respect for the boy. The ship continued on its course, with everyone having fun and passing the time, but Seungyeon was walking on the deck, looking extremely bored. Suddenly, he spots Subin leaning against the railing, staring intently at the sea. He approaches and asks if the white-haired boy is seasick or something. Subin replies that it's something like that, keeping his gaze fixed on the horizon. Just then, a seagull lands on the railing between them, catching the attention of both boys. Sungyeon takes the opportunity and asks what made him want to become a hunter. He tries to answer by mentioning his father, but Subin immediately cuts him off with a warning. He asks for a real answer, wanting to know what made him believe in hunters. Sungyeon gets a bit awkward and ends up confessing he's never really thought about it. Subin just listens in silence, showing no reaction to his answer. Sungyeon then comments on people who get into this life without much thought, and Subin adds that they're just seeking fame and glory in the end. He agrees that some might be like that, but he doesn't sound very sure of his answer. But Subin says they don't get it, because with great power comes great responsibility. Subin says that's why he can't stand hunters who don't take the job seriously. Sungyeon then turns the tables and asks what made him want to become a hunter. He answers that he wants to save everyone, not just a lucky few. Our hero just nods while calmly scrolling on his phone. That's why Subin warns him now that Seungyeon doesn't belong in that school. He's completely confused and asks what he meant by that. Subin then says that the chance of awakening a power is almost astronomical, and that once a rank is set, changing it is as hard as changing fate. Seungyeon then thinks that being a hero isn't cheap because of the tuition. The white-haired boy accuses him of being lucky enough to have his daddy's money. He continues, saying Seungyeon used that cash to buy his spot there. Angry, he tries to defend himself, saying his power just manifested late. But Subin immediately retorts that it has nothing to do with effort. He explains that the power was just hidden, and he was just lucky enough to unlock it. Subin then mocks him, saying that maybe his power is special and that's why he got recommended. But he warns that in the end, they're all in the same boat, just going with the flow. And he adds that everything is decided by pure luck no matter what they do. Seungyeon gets annoyed with this talk and tells him to stop with that anyone can be a hunter story. At this, Subin explodes, saying that some people work themselves to death but still have to give up. The scene flashes back to the moment Seungyeon said the rank didn't matter. Furious, Subin says Seungyeon is more of a child than his sister, and Seungyeon lunges at him with everything he's got. But before the punch can land, an invisible force appears and blocks the attack in midair. The sound of the impact startles everyone. Subin makes up an excuse, saying Seungyeon got carried away and fell. Lying on the ground, Seungyeon is confused, not understanding what the hell he just did. He then remembers that something appeared out of nowhere and deflected his fist in an instant. Subin taunts him, saying he just gives the hunter community a bad name. He turns his back and gives a final warning, telling him to never dream of it again. But suddenly, chains of blue energy shoot up from the ground and bind his feet. Another thud startles everyone, and Seungyeon asks if they're throwing banana peels around. Fallen on the ground, Subin complains that his leg hurts a lot because of the attack. Seungyeon then questions if he thinks it was just luck that got him into that academy. Subin agrees sarcastically, saying maybe he won the lottery that day. But Seungyeon yells that it doesn't matter how, and asks who he is to judge his right to be there. He warns that Subin can say whatever he wants, but nothing will make him give up. With a smirk, Subin warns that with his rank, it'll be easy to make his life hell. So our hero challenges him to a showdown, tonight at midnight. Night falls, and a heavy rain pours down on the ship as it sways with the waves. Seungyeon hears a voice in her dream, promising they will one day meet again. Suddenly, she wakes up startled, her eyes filled with tears from the dream. She sits up in bed, rubbing her eyes, and tries to calm down, thinking it was just a weird dream. But a sense of worry washes over her, and she wonders where her brother has gotten to now. So she heads out into the dark hallway, looking for Seungyeon with her phone in hand. Out of nowhere, a blonde boy appears and startles her, making the poor girl scream. He tells her to be quiet and asks what she's doing out here in the dark. The girl gets defensive and asks what the three of them are up to as well. Yoojin then replies that they're heading to someone else's cabin to meet up with the crew. He seizes the moment and invites Seungyeon to join them at the party. Pareum questions if she'd want to, but Woojin says it's a chance for her to meet people. Excited by the idea, she accepts right away, completely forgetting about her brother. Woojin then opens the door, announcing that they've arrived to join them. A guy in the middle was telling a story, saying they should have seen the look on the loser's face. A pink-haired girl then spots them and tells them to come in and join the party. Woojin freezes at the door, not quite sure how to react to the situation. He tries to turn back and leave, but a friend stops him and asks what's wrong. He complains that no one told him that girl would be there, making him really annoyed. But Seungyeon doesn't even notice the drama, and is just thrilled by the amount of snacks. Pareum tells Woojin to stop the drama, since he was the one who invited her. The upperclassman then calls Woojin over, telling him not to just stand there and to come sit with them. He ends up giving in, thinking that whatever happens, happens. Woojin then introduces Seungyeon to the girl, saying she's one of the new students. With a smile, the girl gives a friendly hello to everyone in the room. The upperclassman gives a somewhat forced smile and says the pleasure is all hers to meet her. Pareum watches the whole interaction with a very suspicious look on his face. He then asks Seungyeon about her brother, and she says he was already gone when she woke up. At that, he remembers that Subin also disappeared, and that something strange happened on the deck earlier. Pareum wonders what's going on between those two as the rain continues to fall. On the court, Seungyeon asks Subin what he wants, standing under an umbrella. He then makes fun of Subin's outfit, who was wearing a very large raincoat. The boy replies that it's a poncho, and Seungyeon says sarcastically that he already knew that. He then asks if Subin is going to fight like that, and he confirms, because of the rain. Seungyeon retorts that his umbrella is even less practical for a real fight. The two of them stare each other down with hatred, ready to start the fight at any moment. Subin can't believe the kid's audacity, and asks if he's being serious. With that, he summons a cube of water, showing that he's also ready to fight. Our hero then manifests his energy chains, unintimidated by the power display. Subin explains that with the rain and the sea, his water spirits become stronger. Seungyeon breaks into a cold sweat, realizing he's at a huge disadvantage here. The white-haired boy warns him that he'd better give up before he gets hurt, but Seungyeon throws the umbrella aside and says he's the one who started all this. Subin then closes his eyes and tells our hero to do as he wishes. Subin's water cube then changes shape, leaving our hero very confused. Then he unleashes a giant wave of water, coming straight for Seungyeon. The attack nearly hit him, but the protagonist dodged at the last second. Subin is surprised by what he sees, as Seungyeon prepares to attack. Angrily, he attacks with his chains, spinning them for a powerful blow. But Subin defends himself with the water and says his attack wasn't half bad, and with a single blow he shatters our hero's chains, calling him a loser. He continues to mock him, saying his trick is weaker than a bicycle chain. Seungyeon then realizes he's using more than one water spirit at the same time. The white-haired boy says the chains are as useless as Seungyeon himself, and he adds that they can't hurt anyone, nor can they truly protect anyone. With a look of pure hatred, our hero decides he's done playing defense. He then charges at Subin, swiftly dodging the water attacks. As he does, he spins the chain in his hand, preparing to use a new kind of strike, but Subin just smirks, asking if he's going to use the same old trick again. Subin defends against the attacks and asks if he's going to use the same move all night. He then points out that he hasn't even had to move, showing the power gap between them. Tired, Seungyeon is left panting, and Subin says this just proves he doesn't belong at the academy. But our hero doesn't care, shouting that he doesn't give a damn if he hasn't moved an inch. With a smirk, he says that's more than perfect for him. Just then, a chain erupts from the ground and snares Subin's feet, leaving him completely surprised. Seungyeon then yanks with all his might, and Subin panics, screaming, "Not again!" Seungyeon pulls him with full force, and slams Subin right into the metal fence. Subin asks if he's just going to keep using the same move, but Seungyeon replies that he will, because it's the only move he knows. Seungyeon stares at Subin on the ground, taunting him that he doesn't look so powerful now, but Subin snaps back saying Seungyeon isn't all that great either. Then Seungyeon tells him to take a look at himself, since he got his ass kicked by a mere F rank. Subin gets furious at the taunt, with nothing to say back right now. He then admits the kid's right, and decides it's time to fight for real. Seungyeon's reaction is one of pure surprise, not understanding what's happening. The scene cuts to Juyong, who yells in shock that it's just too overpowered. We're shown that the character drawn was an SSS rank summoner. A girl comments that he got really lucky, but he replies it was just beginner's luck. Soyeon then asks Pareum what game this is, and he finds it strange that she doesn't know it. She even compares it to Monopoly, but he explains it's a game only for the awakened. The game scans your abilities to create the character, and just then, they call Purium to play. He approaches the table, and, without wasting any time, presses the button to start his turn. With his finger on the scanner, the device begins to scan Player 4's abilities. The result is a B-rank mage, and Pareum says the character even looks like him. Yunbi comments that they use these games to train, and Soyeon understands why her brother brought the console. With that, Yoojin invites her to try too, and she hesitantly accepts. But when the piece falls into her hand, nothing happens, and a silence falls over the room. She then asks why hers isn't glowing, leaving Pureum confused and speechless. Yoojin says he's never seen this before, and a girl suggests her power is too weak for the sensor. Suddenly, an error message pops up, stating it cannot analyze her abilities. The system then begins to re-evaluate the player, leaving everyone in suspense, and the result shocks everyone, as the game suggests she might be a homecomer. The device announces it will grant a hidden class, and the group freaks out at the news. Yoojin turns to her, desperately asking if that information is true. The scene cuts to a flashback, where Soyeon seems worried about her condition. Ji-hyung Chai appears and advises her, telling her not to tell anyone about her powers. She's confused by the warning, and asks why she should hide something like that. He explains that homecomers bring a lot of trouble, just like the 12 years of her life that she lost. Then, he continues, saying that many of them end up turning to a life of crime. And to make matters worse, they're so strong they're like walking natural disasters. He finishes his advice, saying that society doesn't look kindly upon homecomers. Her classmates would find out her secret, and that would put a giant target on her back. The scene returns to the present, with Soyeon remembering the warning and getting very nervous, but Woojin approaches her, excitedly asking her to spill the beans. He explains that he's curious, and wants to know what it's like to be taken to another dimension. The others agree, and the game reveals her class, a dragon hunter. She then asks if it's okay, even though she's a homecomer with powers. One of the girls answers with her mouth full, saying it's totally cool with her. Soyeon gets emotional, seeing that they don't care about her condition. She bows slightly, asking if they really think it's cool and interesting. Since the mood has lightened, she decides she can share her story. Another girl asks if it's true they have to defeat a demon king to come back, and she continues, saying it means she's not afraid to get her hands dirty with blood. The mention of blood triggers a dark and terrifying memory for her. The scene then changes to a basketball court with heavy rain pouring down, and from someone's hands, a liquid starts to drip onto the ground, creating a suspenseful atmosphere. Subin stands up, admitting he knows what it's like to have more skill and still lose. And even with all the strategy, he still ends up on the ground because he's not good enough. Seungyeon gets up angrily, but Subin tells him not to be so hard on himself. He explains that the universe is unfair, and effort can't beat someone who was born with power. While some give up because of a low rank, others get everything handed to them on a silver platter. Subin says this applies to everything in life, because hard work alone has its limits. Subin then warns Seungyeon that the monsters will be much worse than he can imagine. The only thing he'll learn there is a lesson in pain and suffering. But Seungyeon cuts him off, asking if he thinks his father is an S-rank hero. Subin reveals that his father wasn't even an A-rank hunter at the beginning, but he acknowledges that Shinbek achieved more than anyone, clearing S-level dungeons. Seungyeon admits painfully that he hates to say it, but his father saved many lives, and he yells that his father worked his ass off to get where he is, that it wasn't just handed to him. He doesn't care about being F-rank, and tells Subin not to tell him what he can or can't do. Subin then agrees and says that since he knows so much about his father's work, maybe he's heard about the S-rank portal that appeared in Mappo 7 years ago. In a flashback, Shinbek-gi glares at him, irritated, asking where he's going with this story. Seungyeon yells that it has nothing to do with it, but Subin says not everyone died to the monsters. He shouts that he already knows a hunter killed some of the victims that day, and he continues, saying no one holds a grudge for what happened, considering the chaos. Seungyeon tries to defend his father, saying he had no choice in that situation, but Subin cuts him off, shouting and asking if his sister had a choice. He reveals with hatred that she was just a child when Seungyeon's father killed her. The revelation leaves Seungyeon in shock, unable to say a single word. Subin accuses him, saying this isn't some small sacrifice for the greater good. He points at Seungyeon, asking what's the point of a hero who doesn't try to save everyone. The stare down between them grows tense, and Subin says the decision is now his. He needs to hear it from him, to know what he's really fighting for. Subin asks what kind of hunter he wants to be, after all the effort it took to get here. The two of them stand on the court, facing each other in a heavy atmosphere, and suddenly, a mysterious silhouette appears, watching them from nearby. One of the girls says this means So-yeon isn't afraid to get her hands dirty with blood. Pareum tenses up as the girl asks So-yeon if she's right about that. So-yeon is speechless, stammering at the incredibly direct and intimidating question. Desperately, she yells that she really needs to use the bathroom, trying to escape the situation. With her made-up excuse, she stands up in front of everyone to run away, and without waiting for a reply, So-yeon just hurries off, leaving the group behind. The pink-haired girl starts laughing, finding the excuse she used to escape amusing. She then asks Pareum where he found So-yeon, but he tells her to take it easy on her. Miju doesn't stop, asking what class the new girl is in, if it's magic engineering. Yujin and Pareum explain that she's in the hunter division, leaving the blonde guy completely surprised. With a wicked grin, Miju comments that things are going to be tough for So-yeon then. She turns to the group, warning them that in the hunter class, you don't just learn to fight monsters. The scene cuts to Subin, who recalls that hunters are killers who sometimes take lives. Miju reinforces that everyone there knew the rules when they enrolled at Seonghan. The others fall silent, processing the tension that suddenly filled the air. Miju scoffs again, asking if anyone wants to bet on how long the newbie will last. Far from the group, So-yeon wonders to herself, not understanding why she just ran from the conversation. She thinks she could have just said she'd never killed anyone, since it wouldn't even be a lie. But whenever she tries to remember that night, her heart feels like it's about to explode from despair. The image of several fallen people haunts her, and she feels like she doesn't belong there. Amid her anguish, she remembers the fairy and says she misses her. She wonders if she'll be able to make any friends, but a loud noise suddenly startles her. It was the girl from the booth, who recognizes her and waves, greeting her in a very friendly way. The girl introduces herself as Dan Mo, and So-yeon says her name in return, still a bit awkward. Dan Mo asks if she's okay, and invites her to come back, but So-yeon refuses, shaking her head. She says it's a shame, as she was excited to see a secret class for the first time. So-yeon clutches her pajamas, thinking that she tried her best, but now she doesn't know what to do anymore. She vents, saying that every time she looks back, the memories are horrible. At that, Dan Mo reveals that she also almost killed someone once, surprising So-yeon. She confirms it, and explains that her powers didn't manifest until much later, in high school. Dan Mo says her power emerged out of nowhere in the classroom, and her friends were badly hurt, but she tells So-yeon not to blame herself, because feeling bad about it won't do any good. And she says the best thing to do is to make sure something like that never happens again. The scene cuts to a flashback, and So-yeon remembers when she called out for someone named Sion. She asks him about a giant rock that was blocking the path earlier, but Sion replies that he didn't move anything. He just had a long talk with the rock. The rock is shown crying waterfalls with a very sad expression on its face. It's explained to us that the rock spoke the language of sorrow, and he answered with his own. With that, the rock felt better and simply rolled away, continuing on its path. The two of them watch the rock move away, leaving a trail of tears in the snow. Cyan then teaches that everything in the world, in the end, sheds the same tears of sorrow. Back in the present, Danmo says that's how people understand each other and become friends. Soyeon finally smiles and thanks her for all the advice she received from her new friend. Danmo is happy, and Soyeon says that now she knows exactly what she needs to do. Then she pulls her by the hand, promising that no one will ask her silly questions anymore. Suddenly, an explosion of water startles them both, and they wonder what that was. They peek through the door and hear Sungyeon talking about the portal from 7 years ago. Terrified by the shouting, they try to understand what's happening outside. Soyeon recognizes her brother, who defends their father, saying he had no choice at the time. But Subin doesn't accept the excuse and gets even more furious with his response. He then yells that his sister didn't have a choice and accuses Sungyeon's father of killing her. The revelation hits Soyeon like a bomb, and she wonders who her father killed. She can't hear clearly and becomes desperate to understand what they're talking about. Then, she puts the pieces together and realizes that Subin is accusing her father of killing his sister. Subin glares at him and asks what kind of hunter he wants to be after everything. Sungyeon remains silent for a moment, reflecting on the question he heard. He starts to answer, saying he wants to be the guy who saves everyone in the end. But he quickly admits that he'd never really thought about it until that moment, and he reveals that his reason for being there has nothing to do with saving innocent people. Sungyeon says that most people there have their own selfish goals, and he says some people are there with the simple goal of making friends at a new school. And no matter how pathetic an objective might seem, like Sungyeon wanting to be a hunter, to that person it's as serious as any other, and no one has the right to judge. Sungyeon then tells Subin that, deep down, the two of them are not so different. But Subin becomes enraged, and as he summons his weapons, he screams that they are nothing alike. He charges straight at Sungyeon, making his sister scream in despair. With a swift move, Sungyeon turns the tables and slams Subin hard onto the ground. The impact leaves him breathless, screaming in pain and shock at the sudden turn of the fight. Subin activates one of his water crystals, which begins to glow intensely. Sungyeon is shocked to see the blue energy gathering dangerously, and everything explodes in a pillar of light. The power is so immense that a beam of light shoots up from the ship and cuts through the sky. Suddenly, a bright flash appears beside Sungyeon, catching him by surprise, and in the blink of an eye, Subin's object lands a heavy blow on his head. Sungyeon falls to the ground, and a dizzy Subin gets up, complaining about the pain from the attack. He looks at his shoulder and sees one of his water spirits dissolving. He then realizes his power is fading, and Sungyeon seizes the opportunity to attack again. With a solid punch, he hits Subin's face and throws him to the ground once more. But as he holds him, he notices something strange. Subin's eyes are different. He then spots a bracelet on Subin's wrist and understands it's a power restrictor. Subin remembers the exact moment the item was placed on him during the fight, and he wonders how a freshman got such a tool, remembering he took it from his father. With his power sealed, Subin finally collapses, while Sungyeon curses in pain. He then taunts his enemy, saying it's now his turn to eat dirt, but Subin gets up again, and the two resume trading furious punches. The girls watch, terrified, unsure of what to do about the whole fight. Suddenly, a mysterious figure approaches and asks what's happening there. Sungyeon remembers that no matter how pathetic a goal may seem, it's still valid. He lands a punch, thinking that no one can say which goal is better than another. And with another blow, he declares that in the end, the two of them are no different. Subin lies on the ground, wondering if they really are the same in the end. The scene cuts to a flashback of a young Subin floating among his crystals. He sits alone in the middle of a completely destroyed and deserted city, and amidst the rubble, he sees several bodies, his eyes filled with terror. That day, 7 years ago, the scene shows a young Subin walking alone. He ran without stopping, fleeing through the ruins of the place he once called home, and with every step, he wondered why this had happened to a good kid. Filled with hatred, he looked at the blood on the ground and cursed the stars in the sky. The boy collapses among the debris, completely exhausted and without any hope, and it was in the moment he needed help the most that despair took over. He didn't understand why no one reached out a hand to help him up, so he asks where they are going, since they looked like real hunters, but he just stays on the ground, thinking that heroes should help everyone. It was in that moment of pure loneliness that he decided he would do everything by himself. He would become the kind of hunter the world needed, a hero for the weak, and he promises himself that he will never leave anyone behind again. The scene returns to the present, with Sungyeon's words echoing in his head, but in his thoughts, Subin says he's wrong, because they are very different. He doesn't understand how someone with so much power can use it like it's a toy. Sungyeon thinks he can do better, that he needs to be better than this. He then asks for a favor, wondering if it's too much to ask to take the fight a bit more seriously. With that, he admits he knows nothing about a hunter's duty or about Subin, but he questions if it's really so wrong to try and find the answers along the way. After all, He thought the whole point of being at the academy was to learn. Suddenly, the sound of a gunshot echoes across the court, startling both boys. Subin is shocked to see the gun still smoking after the loud shot. A mysterious silhouette then appears before them, with the gun raised in the air. Seungyeon asks who's there, as the figure stares at them in complete silence. The scene flashes back to a minute ago, with Subin and Seungyeon trading blows non-stop. The girls watch, terrified, not knowing what to do about the fight. Suddenly, Pareum shows up and asks what's going on up on deck. He's completely shocked by the scene, unable to believe what's happening. He asks what's wrong, and Soyeon explains they were already fighting like this. Desperate, Pareum yells at them to stop, saying this isn't Pirates of the Caribbean. He quickly realizes they aren't listening and says they need to stop them before they kill each other. The tension makes the girl tremble as she remembers the man she killed. She decides there's no time to waste and says she's going to break them up now. Pareum asks how she's going to do that, and she replies that she doesn't know, but she has to try. He then warns her of the danger, as getting in the middle is like going to a gunfight without a gun. The mental image makes Soyeon nervous, but she doesn't give up on her crazy idea. In her head, she imagines a scene where she simply takes their weapons and ends the fight. She says she's going to take their weapons, driving Pareum crazy as he explains it was a metaphor, but he agrees they need to act, as the water jet from before could sink the ship. An idea strikes Pareum, and without wasting a second, he opens his bag to get something. He announces he has an idea, making Soyeon super curious about what he's going to do. And from inside the bag, he pulls out an energy gun with a bright blue aura. That's when he remembers that, after all, he was also armed for a gunfight. The scene that flashes through Soyeon's mind is a shootout with everyone armed. The fight between the two stops, and they stare at each other, panting, until a gunshot shatters the silence. Pareum appears with the gun pointed up, saying that at least got their attention. He yells, asking what their problem is and why they're using their powers in a stupid fight. The two are shocked, unable to believe that of all people, it was Pareum who was armed. He scolds them, saying they could have damaged the ship or hurt someone. The brawling duo looks embarrassed, averting their gaze like two guilty children. Pareum laments, asking why he's always surrounded by troublemakers. Suddenly, Ji-hyung appears behind him, agreeing that his question is very interesting. He reminds them that Magicore devices are forbidden on campus, even for research, and with a smile, he congratulates the three of them, who have earned themselves a welcome punishment. Seungyeon looks completely embarrassed, thinking his fresh start is already down the drain. The scene changes to the next day, with the ship finally arriving at the island's port. Just then, Woo-jin approaches them, saying he has to admit something to the group. He jokes that you have to be a real delinquent to get suspended before even setting foot on the island. But then Subin apologizes to Pareum, who says it was his fault for pulling out the gun. He explains he was just taking the gun to a professor, which should lessen his punishment. Then Pareum says he's more worried about the two of them, as their punishment is going to be harsh. He tells them to go to their dorms, but Soyeon asks if he's not coming with them. The boys explain that they are probably in different dorms. Seungyeon then tells his sister that the island has several dorms scattered all over. A map is shown, and the girl finally understands how things work there. She just hopes she doesn't have to share a room with the girl she met on the ship. Just then, Seungyeon takes out his phone to see where they'll be staying, and finds out the building's name. Suddenly, one of the suitcases falls to the ground with a loud thud. It was Subin's suitcase. He starts laughing while Soyeon helps him clean up the mess. Seungyeon looks at his phone, and his and Subin's reaction is one of pure shock. He can't believe what he's reading and asks Subin if this is some kind of joke. Suddenly, a voice chimes in, welcoming them to Poppy Hall, their dorm. A woman in a tracksuit introduces herself, saying her name is Doyeon, and she'll be their assistant. Danmo steps forward and introduces herself, and Doyeon thinks the whole group is adorable. Soyeon is super relieved that the pink-haired girl won't be in the same dorm. Just then, Danmo hugs her from behind, celebrating that they're now roommates. Doyeon tells everyone to put their bags in the car, and Soyeon thinks she's already made a new friend. She's overjoyed, as this was the best start to a semester she could have imagined. The scene cuts to the past, explaining that the Joseon era was full of monsters and awakened beings. A scholar then came up with the idea that they needed to educate these people with powers. Years later, he founded a secret school on an island far off the southern coast. The institution became known as Seonghan Academy, a unique place for young hunters. Because of its location, it just looked like any other small private school. But in reality, the campus occupied the entire island, making it a massive academic city. The academy offered the best training equipment and access to a wealth of valuable information. Because of this, the school was the ultimate dream for all aspiring hunters around the world. But there was a single exception to this rule, one person who was very different. That person was So-hyun, who had no idea about the place's reputation. Just then, she celebrates the achievement of tying her hair up all by herself. Suddenly, Seungyeon's voice calls out to her, breaking her concentration in the mirror. He then appears at the door, warning her that they're going to be late for the entrance ceremony. And just like that, Their first semester at Seonghan got off to a truly hectic start. On the day of the entrance ceremony, the scene is set at the student dorm, Poppy Hall. Sungyeon is waiting outside, and when he sees his sister, he says he finally found her. He then asks where Subin is, leaving Soyeon confused by the nickname he used. Dan Mo explains that he had to go to the ceremony early, but Sungyeon doubts they even want him there. But the girl surprises him, asking if he hasn't heard the news about the guy. The scene reveals that Subin is the freshman representative, already giving a speech on stage. He takes the oath on behalf of all the students, promising to follow the academy's rules. Sungyeon scoffs, remembering the guy got a warning before he even set foot on the island. He then wonders how he became the representative, since he was the one who got in with the highest score. In his thoughts, he recalls that Subin's power would give even an A rank a hard time. If Subin didn't have the restrictor, he admits he would have been badly defeated. And to make matters worse, he remembers the bet he made with his father to get into the council. This makes him determined, as he needs to do whatever it takes to survive in this place. But in contrast, his sister is super excited, beaming at the chance for a fresh start. She can't wait for her first class, thinking it'll be way cooler than elementary school. Doyeon approaches and tells Soyeon that she needs to go straight back to the Poppy Hall dorm. The girl is confused, so the assistant asks if she's even seen her schedule. Sungyeon explains that she didn't finish elementary school, so her schedule is different. Doyeon cheerfully confirms, saying that for now, Soyeon will study with her to get her diplomas. Panicking, the girl asks what that means, hoping it's just for one subject. But the assistant replies that it'll be classes in literature, math, English, and much more. Despair takes over, and Soyeon screams that there's no way she's doing it. Sungyeon then thanks them for taking care of his sister, who's in the car making a sour face. The car pulls away, and she yells that she'll get her revenge, but he just thinks that at least he finished school. The scene shifts to the classroom building, where Sungyeon is already seated, waiting for the teacher. He looks at the paper and reads that the subject is Introduction to Hunter Ethics. Subin complains about the delay, but Ujin says a teacher is never truly late. The clock strikes the hour, and the classroom door bursts open with a loud noise. A teacher enters the room, rolling in on some kind of electric unicycle. All the students are stunned, staring in shock at the completely unexpected entrance. With a strange whirring sound, the professor enters the classroom on a hoverboard. He glides to the front of the class, facing everyone with a very serious look. Then the hoverboard stops and he greets everyone in Japanese. He then introduces himself as Professor Jin Hagiwara, welcoming them to his class. But before starting, he warns them he needs to make one thing very clear to the class. Jin Hagiwara reveals he has no love for the school, as he finds everything highly inefficient, and the situation gets even worse when students have special powers and quirks. He continues, saying that everyone there has principles they'd rather die than betray. In his case, Jin Hagiwara explains that he prefers to be efficient in everything he does, and with that, he uses the topic to ask the entire class a question. He questions why only hunters are sent into dungeons and not the military. The students look at each other confused, with no idea what the answer could be. Jin Hagiwara then reveals the answer is because it's the most economical course of action. He explains that the cost of the army would be far greater than the profit from dungeon items. The Awakened, on the other hand, are an investment with a much better return for the government. He concludes that hunting monsters has become an industry because money is the greatest superpower of all. A student reflects that this is why they're called hunters, and not superheroes or saviors. But Jin Hagiwara explains that for a hunter, blood and sweat are also precious resources. He then stares at Sungyeon, warning that there's nothing worse than an avoidable death from exhaustion. In other words, a hunter's life depends on good judgment in using their resources. At that, he turns and calls on a boy in the front row, who flinches at the attention. Jin Hagiwara asks his power type, and he replies that he's a matter manipulator. Then he continues the questioning, and the boy answers that his range is about 100 meters. But Jin Hagiwara wants to know about chemical compounds, and the student says he's never tried. The questions about weight and speed continue, leaving the boy completely speechless. With an intimidating glare, Jin Hagiwara warns that on the battlefield, hesitation is death. He explains that you need to know yourself to win, and only then can you create a strategy. Sungyeon tenses up during the class, while Jin Hagiwara watches him with a piercing gaze, and without wasting any time, he points to the boy with messy hair, who becomes the next target. Seungyeon is startled, and Jin Hagiwara tells him to state his ability type. Jin Hagiwara mocks him, asking if he's going to use his right to remain silent. Seungyeon replies that's not it, stammering from the sudden nervousness. He then explains that no one has ever told him what his power type is. The answer leaves Jin Hagiwara furious, with an expression of pure disbelief and rage. Even Subin, who was sitting nearby, is shocked by his classmate's answer. The scene shifts to the hallway, and Subin appears, yelling Sungyeon's name to confront him. He asks what that nonsense in the classroom was all about, but Sungyeon doesn't understand the question. So Subin calls him an idiot, and Sungyeon awkwardly agrees with the assessment, but he defends himself, saying he never learned the technical terms or the jargon. The explanation leaves Subin even more shocked, and he tells the guy to wait a moment. He then asks if Seungyeon really knows nothing about his powers. Losing his patience, Subin calls him a loser and wishes him good luck in a very mocking tone. The other students comment on how rude that was, leaving Seungyeon standing there alone. At that moment, he only wished he had understood the consequences of his own ignorance. In his office, Professor Ji-hyung Chai looks at Seungyeon-gi with surprise. He asks what the boy wants, letting him know he's very busy right now. Chae then expresses his surprise, asking if he's already in trouble on the very first day. Seungyeon admits he is, explaining that everyone else seemed to understand everything except him. He tries to justify himself by saying he's chronically online, which leaves Ji-hyung a bit confused. Ji-hyung gets straight to the point, asking if he even has an awakened user license. Upon hearing the answer, he gets furious and grabs the boy, shouting if he's serious about not having one. He explains that it's the first thing you're supposed to do, but Seungyeon replies that it's not his fault. The boy says minors need consent, but Ji-hyung shouts, asking who told him that. Ji-hyung thinks about how Shin-baek needs to at least get his son a license, despite his fears. He then grabs his phone and asks if his sister, being a returnee, has a license. The scene cuts to So-yeon, who doesn't understand the question and wonders why she would need one. On the other end of the line, Assistant Do-yeon-an confirms that the situation doesn't look good. With a click, Ji-hyung hangs up the phone, clearly frustrated with the answer he received. He yells that waiting until he's of age will be too late, warning the boy that he's screwed. Ji-hyung shouts, questioning how Seungyeon has trained until now, startling the boy. He replies that he only did physical training because Ju-young said he wasn't ready for his powers. But Ji-hyung corrects him, saying it's not that Ju-young didn't want to, he simply couldn't teach him. It's explained that upon getting a license, every awakened person in the world automatically enters a pact. This pact acts as a non-disclosure agreement, forbidding the user from revealing their powers. The license creates a network of chains that connects everyone, and it can't be easily broken. He warns that everything on the internet is just the tip of the iceberg, or else pure fake news. Seungyeon asks why all the secrecy, and the answer is that the powers are a danger to society. Ji-hyung explains that even a weak, awakened person can eliminate a civilian with the snap of a finger. The boy is shocked, finally understanding why Ju-young forced him to do such boring training. He complains that he wants a refund for his lost time, but Ji-hyung just watches him in silence. It's revealed to us that Chai recommended him not just for his rare power, but for the way he uses it. He finds it impressive what the boy managed to do, even with his power chained. With a smile, he says his talent is finding promising individuals and that Seungyeon is lucky to be his student. To wrap things up, Ji-hyung gives him a welcome gift, a small bluish cube. Ji-hyung explains that it's a blue cube, a device used to access the secret network of the awakened. He says he'll send more details later and tells Seungyeon to start studying the material he provided. With a serious look, Chae gives one last piece of advice. Fake it till you make it and don't look lost. He reminds him that in an elite school, it's every man for himself, and asks if he really wants to join the council. Seungyeon breaks into a cold sweat, feeling the intense pressure of the competition within the school. He agrees that he can keep up appearances as the scene shifts to a beautiful mansion. Inside, So-yeon is impressed upon receiving a similar cube, but this one is reddish. She asks Do-yeon if it has games, but the assistant tells her to just press the object. As she does, the cube begins to glow, releasing an energy with strange symbols. The light grows stronger and a screen appears, confirming the identity of student So-yeon-gi. The girl is amazed, crying out in surprise at the information appearing around her. Excited, she asks if she can ask the floating device for anything she wants. The cube then answers on its own, leaving So-yeon stunned that it can talk. She gets ready to ask a question, while the assistant watches her with a smile. The scene cuts to a memory of the past, about an S-rank gate that appeared 7 years ago. So-yeon gets straight to the point and asks what happened in the Mapo district 7 years ago, but the system warns that the search query is too vague, terrifying assistant Do-yeon. She tries again, explaining that it has to do with her father and someone who might have died. At this, Do-yeon nervously interrupts her, suggesting they start with the school forum to relax. The assistant insists it will be fun to see what her friends are talking about, even though the girl is confused. With that, the system begins to access the general discussion board for Seonhan Academy. The screen fills with random posts from students, with one inviting people to dinner. Another post shows a picture of a white cat, leaving So-yeon completely confused. Next, a conversation pops up making fun of a student who knew nothing in hunter ethics class. So-yeon complains that it's not fun, but Do-yeon says it's just normal chatter. Suddenly, a message mocking her brother Seungyeon appears, and she instantly recognizes the name. It says he didn't even know his own type, and her eyes fill with worry. The students question how he passed the exams without a license, making the girl tense. Meanwhile, Seungyeon is walking outside, reading about the 5 types of awakened beings. The blue cube then asks if he wants to investigate, and he questions how that would be possible. The cube tells him to just watch a professional at work, and just then, 2 students appear excitedly. The boy approaches him ceremoniously, asking if he is the famous Sungyun Gi from the hunter class. With the target identified, he yells for his partner to get the camera ready, leaving Sungyun confused. Suddenly, a camera is shoved in his face, and the student announces a live broadcast from the journalism club. Before he can react, the guy asks him to put a ring on his finger for just a second. Surprised, the reporter announces that the device is a marvel, while Sungyun asks if it's a mood ring. The guy laughs and confirms he's as clueless as the rumors said, revealing that it's a detector. And then, with dramatic suspense, he announces that the test result was F rank. The reporter celebrates, saying the headline will finally make people buy their newspaper. Sungyun tries to complain that he didn't agree to an interview, but the guy completely ignores him. The student gets in his face with the microphone, aggressively asking who he bribed to get in. He yells that the forums say he either paid his way in or is the disappointing son of some billionaire. With a furious look, Sungyun cuts him off, telling him to get the camera out of his face now. The girl senses the tense atmosphere and says she's out of there, as he repeats his warning. But the reporter refuses, shouting that a true journalist never lets a tense mood ruin a story. He laughs and says that if Sungyun wants to cancel the interview, he'll have to go through him first. In a mocking tone, he asks what an F rank is going to do, maybe play the daddy card. His confident laughter vanishes instantly. Sungyun pines the guy to the ground, who screams that the story is canceled while the girl snaps photos. Sungyun wonders if this is the kind of person he'll have to deal with from now on. In the distance, the reporter keeps shouting that this is a war crime, as Sungyun laments the long road ahead. In the classroom, Jin Hagiwara announces that they'll be forming teams of 3 for a simulated hunt. A student approaches Sungyun, but tells him his team is unfortunately full. Another student also turns him down, saying he's already found a group and maybe next time. A girl then makes it very clear that her team only accepts C-rank members or higher. Seeing he's the only one left, he calls over Jin Hagiwara, not quite sure what to do in this situation. Sungyun explains that it seems no one in class wants to team up with him, leaving the master thoughtful. Jin Hagiwara then decides that since that's the case, he'll be a 1-person team. The boy is completely terrified by the idea, panicking about what's to come. Suddenly, a giant, scary stone monster appears in front of him, growling at him. The beast attacks with a quick blow, and he barely dodges it, thinking it looks like Solo Lev, but it's no use. He's easily defeated, and his final score ends up being a 0. The scene changes, and now, in another class, the professor calls him to answer a question on the board. He asks for a plan of action for the dungeon, but Sungyun admits he doesn't know and asks to pass. The professor even tries with multiple choice, but the boy starts quoting a movie as his answer. At this, the master explodes with rage, yelling if he thinks this is some kind of game. With an awkward smile, he apologizes to the professor for his clueless response. The scene shifts to the cafeteria, where he complains to himself that the teachers are always picking on him. He's frustrated, as one of them seems to take pleasure in asking the most difficult questions. Suddenly, he sees his sister Soyeon in line, who recognizes him from a distance and smiles. She waves at him with an excited look, happy to see him in the same place. But before he could react, Danmo quickly pulls her in another direction. The girl even tries to argue, saying her brother was eating alone over there. Alone again, he feels a little relieved that at least no one is bothering his sister. He ignores the stares and continues eating, telling himself that it's nothing. We're shown that in middle school, he wasn't popular either, and always kept to himself. He thinks his biggest problem now is the student council, since no one will support him. Not unless he can turn the tables. Just then, someone approaches his table. It's Subin Seol, who arrives with his tray and asks if he's eating alone again. He sits down and provokes him, saying no one wants a cage fighter like him around. Sungyun stands up but quickly tells Subin to sit back down, as they need to talk. The white-haired boy then reveals that the topic is about his sister, surprising him. Subin begins to explain, saying his sister isn't having much fun around here either. At this, Sungyun leans closer to the table, a very worried expression on his face. He asks seriously, telling Subin to start the whole story from the beginning. The scene changes to the previous day, in the monster hunting class, where the girls were fighting. One of the blonde students gets angry and yells at her partner, asking if she was kidding. The partner was Soyeon, who apologizes awkwardly, not really knowing what to do. The girl complains that she didn't use her power or her spear, making Soyeon feel even more guilty. At that moment, Danmo intervenes, asking her to go easy on the new girl. The blonde girl ignores her and walks away, muttering whatever, and leaving the two behind. Awkwardly, Soyeon turns and apologizes to Danmo, while Subin watched everything. Danmo comforts her and says it's okay, as he always helps her. It's explained that she can only do the basics because he protects her in the classes they have together. She thinks that she tries, but she hasn't been able to use magic since that day, remembering the professor's warning. With a painful memory, she shrinks in her chair and wishes she could forget everything that happened. She thinks that she can't stop wondering about the incident from 7 years ago. Her blue cube is no help, and Assistant Anne always changes the subject when she asks. With her eyes heavy with sleep, she wonders if school life is this hard for everyone. Exhaustion finally wins, and amid the classroom noise, she ends up falling asleep at her desk. Suddenly, she jolts awake, realizing the class had already ended and she didn't even notice. She scolds herself for falling asleep, while Ujin also enjoys the end of class. Having not taken any notes, she thinks about asking for help and sees Subin surrounded by people at the front. Seeing how popular he is, she feels awkward and remembers how he helped her before. Just then, the boy notices her gaze and turns in her direction, leaving her frozen. Embarrassed, she runs out of the classroom, leaving Subin confused about what just happened. She stops on a staircase, panting, trying to catch her breath after running away. Looking down, she calls herself a dork again, feeling bad about the situation. But a voice greets her, and she turns in surprise at being called by the same nickname. It was Junil, who appears with a wide smile, seeming very happy to find her there. She recognizes his face, remembering an old and slightly scary memory. He tries to cheer her up, asking if she's down because of the class. With a smile, he offers to lend her his notes, making Soyeon super excited about the idea. Juyong confirms with a shout and tells her to come with him, and she happily agrees. He leads her to another classroom and from a distance starts shouting Yoonbi-hong's name. The girl turns and asks what he wants, while Soyeon watches, confused. He then asks to borrow her notes, leaving Soyeon shocked, as she thought he had his own. Yoonbi looks uncomfortable and reminds him that last time, he said it would be the last time, but Juyong explains that the new girl fell asleep, and he just wants to do her a favor and maybe take a look himself. The girl looks sad, almost crying from the pressure he's putting on her. He notices her reaction and asks why she's staring at him, saying he can't fail this year. In a blackmailing tone, he asks if that's what she wants, for him to drop out of school. At this, Soyeon intervenes, saying she doesn't have to show them if she doesn't want to, so she shouldn't feel forced. The guy is left speechless, completely surprised by her sudden action. She says it's mean to force someone to do something, explaining that's what bullies do. With an irritated look, he turns and questions if she, a newbie, is calling him a bully. He gets angry that she's treating him like a thug, but Soyeon tries to explain that wasn't her intention. Then, a student asks if he's ever tried not being a muscle-bound bully, just for a change. The whole class starts laughing and whispering, leaving Juyong completely embarrassed by the teasing. He then tells her to forget the notes and leaves, trying to escape the shame. But as she turns, he grabs her wrist tightly, holding her in place. Juyong then demands a thank you, saying that a thanks would be the least she could do. He squeezes her wrist, saying that because of her, everyone sees him as the bad guy in the story. With a furious look, he warns her that she's not leaving until she clears his name in front of everyone. She's terrified and pleads with him, begging him to let go of her arm because it's starting to hurt. Unable to take it anymore, she reacts by slapping him across the face and screams for him to leave her alone. The sound shocks the entire room, and even Soyeon is startled by her own action. He looks at his hands and then his nose, unable to believe he's bleeding from a simple slap. He asks how she managed to make him bleed, and the girl realizes the gravity of the situation. Terrified, he covers his mouth and questions if what she used was her awakened power. He yells that his power is to be as hard as rock, and a weak little slap shouldn't even tickle. Juyong wipes the blood from his mouth and shouts that now he finally understands everything that's been going on. He accuses the girl of being a returnee, leaving Soyeon in a panic with the revelation. The kids in the class start whispering about it, while Juyong hides his face in pure frustration. The students get scared, remembering another returnee who caused trouble last year. He yells that all returnees are the same, just using their powers without caring about anyone else. Angrily, he storms off, saying he should have figured it out back on the ferry. But when he tries to punch her, a bluish light barrier blocks the attack completely. The magic shield floats in front of Soyeon, who doesn't even understand where it came from. Suddenly, a voice comes from the stairs, questioning if this is what bullies do around here. It was Subin, who appears with a blue aura and says he liked her attitude in standing up to him. He walks towards Juyong, explaining that where he comes from, things are very different. And with a serious look, he says that when someone stands up to an oppressor, that's called speaking the truth. Juyong steps forward and asks what he wants, but Subin introduces himself as a freshman too. He says he saw the fight but doesn't understand the accusation about her power, and Juyong yells that it's obvious. With a sinister smile, the upperclassman then accuses Subin himself of using his power just now. Subin explains that returnees have enhanced physical strength and tells the guy to read a book. He then asks the class if anyone saw her use her power, but everyone remains silent. Besides, he says that it actually looked like Juyong was asking for a beating. Subin points out that he was the one who grabbed her, exposed her in public, and even tried to attack her. To him, she only used her power in self-defense, and the upperclassman deserved much worse. Filled with rage, Juyong charges at him, yelling that he's going to finish that scrawny kid, but he freezes midway, paralyzed by Subin's cold, intimidating gaze. An immense aura of power surrounds the boy, who challenges him to continue the attack. With a smile, he warns that he never turns down a good fight, making the situation tense. The girls in the class cheer for Subin, while Ju-young just grinds his teeth in anger. Realizing he has no chance, he gives up the fight and storms off, stomping his feet in fury. The door slams shut, and Subin stands there with a calm, victorious expression. After finishing the story, Subin asks Seungyeon if he finally understands her situation. He says he understands why she's keeping her distance, but warns that he needs to look after his sister. Now that everyone knows she's a returnee, people might start bothering the girl. Seungyeon thinks it's not a lack of care, but he already has too many problems to deal with. Just as he was about to give up, Woojin Jeon shows up and says he can think of a solution. He sits at the table and starts stealing Subin's food, who glares at him, annoyed. Subin then asks where he came from since Woojin appeared out of thin air. Woojin stares at the noodles with a sad look and begins a very sentimental speech. He recalls that last year the food was perfect, with great texture, flavor, and a rich broth. Even the lunch lady was a sweetheart, making him think about how things could be. Seungyeon and Subin are completely lost, exchanging confused glances at his rambling. He slams the table as he remembers her retirement, and Subin yells, asking what that has to do with anything. Seungyeon gets annoyed and asks how he got there, but Woojin ignores his question. He then explains that he can help improve Seungyeon's reputation within the school. With a glimmer of hope, he asks how he would do that, since his image is terrible. Woojin tells him to be patient and wait for the open class that's happening in a few weeks. Seungyeon asks if it's like a parents' day, and he confirms it's something like that. But Subin explains it's a fighting event, pitting the freshmen against the upperclassmen. He points out that unlicensed people can't enter, but Woojin says it's not the parents who are coming. In fact, an army of professional hunters will be watching, leaving them both shocked. He details that representatives from guilds and the industry will be there, like a career fair. With that, it clicks for Seungyeon. He realizes this is his big chance to turn things around. He thinks that if he stands out in this event, he can change his reputation at school quickly, but he asks how it all works, since there are too many students to fight in one day. Subin explains that last year they were divided by number, and it'll probably be the same this time. Woojin suggests he pick a D rank to humiliate, and even offers to list some names, but Seungyeon refuses the offer, saying he's not there to beat up on weaker people. With a determined smile, he makes it clear that his plan is much bolder than that. The scene then shifts to the school library, a large, old-fashioned place. He walks through the aisles, wondering why they told him to go to the media room. He tells Ji-hyung Chai that he just wanted to see some old tapes of other students in the room. Ignoring the rules, Ji-hyung simply swipes the card and grants him access. The system welcomes him, and Seungyeon enters the archive, a place filled with shelves. He remembers what Woojin said, that the students were divided into groups for the fights. Analyzing the list, he sees his number is 25, and there are 2 returnees nearby. He calculates that, with 30 students per group, the chance of one of them ending up in his is very high. So, his plan is to study their fighting styles and challenge them during the observation class. He already imagines the scene, with everyone from the industry watching him finally break his chains. His goal is clear, to get a victory against a returnee in front of everyone. He fills with confidence, certain that this is the perfect plan. Elsewhere, Ju-young angrily complains about how that nerd So-yeon humiliated him earlier. He tells Miju he's going to get revenge at the open class to teach her a lesson, but the girl looks at him mockingly, doubting he could teach anyone a lesson. She reminds him that So-yeon was the one who broke his nose, leaving Ju-young speechless. Miju then admits she's not a fan of the girl either, making him agree instantly. With a confident smile, Miju offers to take care of So-yeon for him, which surprises him. He doubts she has a better chance, but Miju confirms it and says she'll want a favor in return. With a serene look, she reinforces that she just needs him to owe her a small favor in the future. Ju-young reminds her that So-yeon is a returnee, and she won't be an easy target, even for her. But with a mysterious tone, she replies that she has her own ways of dealing with this problem. She thinks the returnee status will only make things easier, as we see So-yeon studying. 2 weeks pass, and the scene cuts to Seungyeon, standing in front of a giant door. With a determined look, he braces himself for what's to come as the door slowly opens. He enters a huge arena, where all the other students were already waiting for the event to start. With a focused expression, he thinks that the moment of truth to prove his worth has finally arrived. The scene changes to the school building as the teacher announces the end of the day's class. So-yeon feels frustrated, thinking she was completely useless during today's activity. But just as she's about to leave, Ji-hyung calls out to her, saying she isn't dismissed yet. He tells her he'll personally take her to the open class, which leaves her quite surprised. The two walk through a nature-filled area, and she awkwardly calls out to the teacher. She asks if there's really a classroom there, and he replies that yes, it's right in front of them. Just then, a lone elevator appears in the middle of nowhere, and he invites her in. It's explained that this is one of the ways to get to subterranean hall number 13. With a metallic clang, The doors close and the elevator begins to descend rapidly. He then asks if she's ever been to the underground campus, but she didn't even know it existed. With a smile, he explains that the school was a secret and the best way to hide was underground. She repeats the information, shocked by the idea of an entire campus beneath her feet. The elevator doors open with a soft whoosh, revealing what lies below. A giant, futuristic underground city appears, and she gasps in awe at the sight. She compares the place to a cartoon and asks what they keep in a place like this. He summarizes by saying that down here, they keep everything that's too dangerous for the surface. He lists magical devices, distorted areas, and even monsters captured for research. Suddenly, a deep, low sound echoes from a creature trapped in a pit. Ji-hyung admits that even he doesn't know what's in all the restricted areas down here. A strange object makes a weird noise, leaving So-yeon breathless just thinking about it. The elevator finally stops, and he takes the opportunity to ask a question out of curiosity. He wants to know how she's finding life at Seonhan's school, catching her off guard. In a more serious tone, he asks if anyone has been bothering her or causing trouble. She replies that it's the opposite. She can't seem to make many friends there, but she says at least she has her friend Danimo to always keep her company. Besides, she mentions that Pureum and Yoojin have also been very friendly to her. She thinks Subin is nice, but feels like everyone else seems afraid to get close. She figures it's because of the fight in the cafeteria, where she accidentally hurt a guy. Her biggest fear is accidentally hurting someone else at school, or worse, that she might lose control and repeat the tragedy from her past. Ji-hyung comforts her, telling her not to worry about those things right now. With a smile, he guarantees that if something goes wrong, he'll step in and reminds her about her brother. She feels more relieved hearing that and nods in agreement. As he opens the door, he advises her, guaranteeing that what happened before won't happen again. The girl enters the arena and notices the place is packed, with people everywhere. Down below, Jin Hagiwara complains in Japanese that Ji-hyung has finally shown up. Che grabs the microphone and announces he'll give the only briefing of the day for the students. In the stands, her friend saves her a seat, while he explains the rules of the fight. We're told the event is only possible because of this special combat arena. He announces that the arena was a gift from their partners at UJ Magicore Industries. With a remote, he activates an energy barrier that surrounds the entire battlefield. It's explained that the fighters' suits connect directly to the energy barrier. He then asks what happens if someone takes a hit inside the combat arena. To demonstrate its safety, he smacks Hagiwara on the head with the microphone with full force. The poor guy gets a strong jolt, and his miniature on the barrier immediately starts to crack. It's explained that the barrier absorbs the damage, which is why Hagiwara felt absolutely nothing. So-yeon understands she can use her power, since the arena prevents anyone from getting seriously hurt. But Chai tells them to treat it as a class, where the upperclassmen teach the rookies a few things. Subin is incredulous at Ji-hyung's words, as it's impossible not to be nervous with that crowd. Seongyeon also gets tense, wondering if Ji-hyung is serious about staying calm. He looks at the stands packed with serious-looking people, feeling the immense pressure of the place. With a crowd this size, he's sure that guild scouts are present. We are shown that Sinsong and Yuje, the two giants of the hunter industry, have sent their representatives. And of course, both companies would be represented by some of their most important members. In the audience, we see hunters Gang Ho-oh and Mateo from the powerful Sinseong Guild watching. On the other side are hunters Ji Won-gu and Jin Uk-do, representing the feared UJ Guild. Mateo then complains, asking why the company is paying them to watch a bunch of kids. But Gang-ho replies that he expected as much, since this was Mateo's first open class. He explains that the smartest students know this isn't just a training session. This event is their chance to appeal to the guilds, as a victory here can open many doors. Gang-ho warns that they aren't there on a company outing, but as talent scouts. With a serious look, he tells Mateo to stop chattering and keep his eyes on the fights. He doesn't want the guys from the UJ Guild to steal all the rough diamonds that show up. Meanwhile, Yoojin smiles, wondering who he'll choose first. He already had the right person in mind, but then he notices someone approaching Seongyeon. A blonde girl with a giant case on her back calls out to him, asking the senior to excuse her. She then turns to Seongyeon and asks if he happens to need a training partner. The crowd is shocked by the question, and the girl doesn't understand their over-the-top reaction. The students around them start to whisper, recognizing Seongyeon as the famous rookie. Hearing the rumors, the girl stares at him differently, analyzing the target before her. After a moment's thought, she simply nods, accepting the challenge without a word. Seeing the fight was accepted, Seongyeon and Woojin remain silent as the girl walks away. Woojin yells desperately, asking if he's crazy for wanting to fight a returner, while Subin stands quietly with a surprised look. He replies that he doesn't care about her strength, because his chains can defeat anyone, just like when he used his power restraint to immobilize Subin in the past. With a smile, Woojin says it was a bold move, but he knows Seongyeon has a plan. He explains that despite her appearance, She's actually one of the weakest returners there. Apparently, the girl simply refuses to use her special returner powers. Sungyun just gives him a side glance, silently processing this completely unexpected information. Then, Yujin realizes the truth and asks if he chose her purely on intuition, without knowing anything. It's said she only uses magical devices to fight because she locked away her powers at the end of last year. In other words, he's going to fight a returner without any of the advantages she'd normally have. In the audience, Gangho-Oh and Mateo watch everything seriously as the sound of swords echoes. In the arena, two fighters clash furiously, their blades meeting in a violent impact. It's then explained that the blonde girl is also a sword user, observing everything. The narrator reveals that the sword is called Red Mist, and it has a unique ability. With this weapon, the user can unleash a giant arc of cutting aura. Unlike normal attacks, this aura can be launched in any direction, not just forward. That's why she can fight without using her powers, and Sungyun listens attentively. He's surprised by this news, but his friend says she recently sealed her powers. In a flashback, we see that the school gave her the sword, which outrages Sungyun. His classmate then scoffs, telling him to look for a weapon in the school's trash. The conversation is interrupted when an excited Yujin arrives, asking if Soyeon came for the duels. She asks if her friend already has an opponent, and she confirms she does, curious. Upon hearing she'll be fighting Miju, Soyeon is completely shocked by the revelation. Yujin confirms it's the same Miju they met before, making the situation tense. But she explains that Miju apologized, and that's why they arranged a friendly duel. Soyeon warns that the real Miju would never be friendly, unless she was possessed. He then shakes Seongyun, saying his sister is going to need an exorcist urgently. At that moment, the announcer calls the second match, summoning Danmo and Jun-il to the arena. In the stands, the two friends react with complete surprise upon hearing the names. Danmo jumps for joy, shouting that it's her turn, leaving the other apprehensive. Her friend tries to ask if she's sure, reminding her that Jun-il is a very problematic guy. But Danmo turns to her with a calm look and tells her not to worry about it. She then promises with a dark expression that she'll never let a bully beat her again. In the arena, Jun-il walks with an arrogant smirk, thinking he's the man. Before the fight, competitors are instructed to place their weapons on a registration conveyor belt. It's explained that they need to scan the weapons data to ensure safety in the arena. The registration is completed, and the system announces that the match will begin in 1 minute. Jun-il then taunts her, asking for her name, and she replies that it's Danmo Seonbai. He draws his giant sword and asks if she has any idea where he got it. Then he yells that it's a weapon from his sponsors, called the Echo Slicer. In the audience, the two men are completely shocked by the revelation they just heard. The younger one asks if the Seonbai knew about the sponsorship, but he replies that it's news to him. With that, the man understands the superior's plan, figuring it all out with a single look. In the arena, Jun-il shouts that his rare weapon is heading to an exclusive auction in a few weeks. While stretching, Danmo doesn't understand why he's talking so much about the weapon, but she notices a detail. Her friend in the audience realizes that if he uses a sword, it can only mean one thing. She then concludes out loud that he's a sentinel, making the other girl tense. The scene shifts to a flashback, where 5 colored pieces are thrown onto a table. A girl begins to explain that the awakened are divided into 5 power classes. Then another shows the 5 classes, explaining that most people fit into one of them. The first class she points to is the Sentinel, the melee combat fighter type. She continues, saying that if a classmate uses a sword as their main weapon, it's almost certain they'll be a Sentinel, and the scene returns to the fight's countdown. As Danmo readies her weapon, we're reminded that Sentinels use power to strengthen themselves. The countdown reaches 1, and the explanation about what's important when facing one of them stops. The fight finally begins, and Jun-il charges forward with everything he's got. His sword comes down with force, but she manages to block the blow with her own weapon. Jun-il is surprised by the girl's strength as she holds back the impact of his blade. Suddenly, Danmo notices her sword has started to crack. He attempts a smashing attack on the ground, but she dodges at the last second, though some shards fly towards her, shattering it. Still, the impact grazes her, leaving her friend in the audience desperate. The scene reveals the final tip from the flashback, which was to avoid close-quarters combat. Jun-il takes the opportunity and goes for a decisive strike, but Danmo dodges the attack. Danmo's weapon begins to glow intensely, while Jun-il stares at her with a surprised look. With that, she spins her weapon in the air, which seems to accumulate energy and change its shape. He is completely shocked as he sees the sword approaching, and Jun-il blocks the blow. Danmo herself is confused for a moment, not understanding what just happened. He wonders how she defended from that angle, when a red glow appears on his equipment. With wide eyes, he suddenly perceives a strange energy coming towards him. This mysterious force simply throws Danmo away, leaving Jun-il completely stunned. In the audience, everyone is in shock, not understanding how the girl was thrown like that. Soyeon analyzes the situation and realizes the sword repelled Danmo without Jun-il doing anything. At that, Sungyeon puts his hands on his head, Starting to understand what's happening, he deduces that the sword reflects damage, and Junil admits that she almost got him. Even while panting, Dan-mo smiles and warns him that he hasn't seen anything yet. Then with a confident look, she says she's just getting started. In a flashback, the girl remembers the rule to avoid sentinels, but says there are exceptions. Then she introduces the second class, the summoner, which is the perfect answer against them. We're told that summoners conjure unique weapons, like Sungyun's ethereal chains, and depending on its power, this weapon can turn the tide and nullify any disadvantage in a fight. Back in the arena, Junil admits she almost got him, but he doesn't seem worried. He boasts about being faster and stronger, and his sword begins to glow brightly. Dan-mo's friend in the audience notices something strange is happening to his sword. Junil himself is confused, looking at his weapon without understanding what's going on. Suddenly, the blade of his sword starts to bend and warp, making a noise. The weapon transforms into a kind of whip, and Dan-mo taunts him to watch out, but he yells that it's not over, and charges forward with everything he's got, creating another impact. At that moment, in the audience, Miju's eyes glow with a sinister pink light. In the arena, Junil advances with a red aura, and Dan-mo prepares for the blow. The red energy concentrates and fires a powerful beam towards the girl. The attack is so strong that Dan-mo's weapon cracks under the pressure, and Junil gives a nervous smile. Dan-mo moves in to try a low sweep, and she starts a sequence of rapid attacks, forcing her opponent to retreat across the arena. The girl seizes an opening and lands a direct hit to his face with the side of her weapon. The impact is so powerful it sends him flying back, showing the force she put into the attack. She's surprised because she hit him with everything she had, but it seems to have caused no damage. He realizes the last attack had no effect, and just stands there, completely unharmed. Suddenly, he touches his own face, and feels the skin sink in a very bizarre way. He backs away, startled by the strange sensation, yelling without understanding what's happening, and then it clicks, and he realizes her weird spoon is to blame for all of this. It's explained that anything her weapon touches instantly turns soft like paste. The effect makes everything like rubber or pudding, and he figures out that strengthening his body is useless, because a single touch is enough to soften the area, and then any blow would be fatal. Dan-mo realizes he's figured out her power, and now the fight is going to get much harder. She thinks she got lucky with that attack, because his sword fell apart at just the right moment. So she concludes that a fork or a spoon won't cut it, and she needs something sharper. We're told that her power has two weaknesses the enemy doesn't know about yet. The first is that she can only pull one piece of silverware at a time, limiting her attack options. And the second is that she never knows which piece of silverware she'll be able to pull next. For example, she can swap the spoon for a fork, but there's no guarantee. This switch leaves her defenseless for a moment, so she's worried about the risk. She laments not being like normal people, feeling bad about her ability. In a flashback, she remembers when she managed to summon a knife, only to be humiliated by her classmates. The other students laugh and throw trash on her, leaving her alone and helpless in the locker room. Lying on the floor and covered in garbage, she stares with a look of pure sadness and anger. But it's in that moment that she manages to summon a knife, which glows with a green aura. In the hallway, she confronts the bullies with the knife in her hand, and the bullies lunge at her. All the students start running, desperate, but instead of fear, she feels her heart race, and she realizes this is what she likes. With an excited smile on her face, she finally understands what a real fight feels like. Back in the arena, she gets excited at the idea of a fair fight against another awakened one. But Junil gets tired of his weapon and decides to throw away that useless piece of junk. In the audience, Miju is completely shocked to see his attitude in the middle of the fight. With a blue aura, he warns that if she's not going to hold back, then neither will he. He says he'll break every one of her weapons, and Dan-mo challenges him to try with a smile. At this, the girl grips her weapon tightly, getting ready to show what she can do. Then she throws the fork towards Junil. A giant fork appears flying towards him, leaving the guy completely stunned. He defends on reflex and wonders when she managed to switch weapons. Looking up, he notices a strange red circle, not getting what it means. The fork floats, and he feels a presence behind him, turning around with a panicked expression. It's Dan-mo who appears at his back and lands a powerful blow with her knife. The attack hits him dead on with a brutal impact, catching him completely by surprise. He smiles sinisterly, staring her down up close with a look of pure malice. Then he asks if she wants to know what his knife does, revealing its special ability. It's explained that wherever the blade hits, several other cuts appear all over the target's body. With that, he holds her and asks if she's ever heard the saying, "Death by 1,000 cuts." The knife hits its target, and the power's effect strikes them both in midair. With the impact, they both slam onto the ground, kicking up a cloud of dust in the arena. In the audience, the group of friends stares, mouths agape, unable to believe what just happened. Junil gets up and calls the girl a rat, while she recovers from the blow on the ground. But suddenly the announcer declares a winner, catching Dan-mo completely by surprise. The victory is then declared for Junil Go, who also doesn't understand the situation at all. He stands frozen, and even asks if it was really him, looking around in complete confusion. In the audience, Gang Ho-oh comments that the result was fair, as the girl fought well, but he concludes that in the end, the difference in brute strength was the deciding factor. Junil celebrates his victory excitedly, while Dan Mo lets out a sigh of defeat. Her friend comes over apologizing, but Dan Mo comforts her, saying she did great. Dan Mo thanks them for the support and walks past her friends, who watch the scene attentively. Yoo-jin taunts Seung-yeon, saying it must suck to see his sister's bully win, but Seung-yeon replies no, because to him, Dan Mo was the one who won the fight. His friend is clueless, looking at him with a completely confused expression. He explains that the goal here is to catch the attention of the big names in the industry. It's not enough to just win. You have to stand out in any way possible. Seung-yeon says Dan Mo put on a show, going head-to-head with a much stronger opponent, and she even noticed when her opponent lost focus, seizing the opportunity. She switched weapons without him noticing, giving a masterclass in strategy in the arena. On the other hand, that brute Junil had every advantage and still struggled. With a performance like that, he thinks no hunter guild will be interested in him. Dungeons are death traps, and it's easy to lose focus in them. That's why what really matters is the ability to get straight to the point with total focus. Yoo-jin agrees, saying the guy wasn't impressing anyone with all that nonsense. Seung-yeon says he thought the weapon would carry him, but he doesn't understand why. His friend replies that a brute doesn't need a reason to be a brute. Seung-yeon remembers the announcement about the sponsored weapon and starts connecting the dots. He then raises the suspicion that perhaps the Sinseong group itself set this whole thing up, and with so many important hunters there, the academy must have a bigger goal for the event. He says it's a trade-off. Students show off their skills and clients show off their toys. He then hypothesizes that Miju proposed a direct deal to Junil. The company would give him the sword in exchange for publicity, promising him a future opportunity. Yoo-jin agrees that this explains why he was bragging so much about the weapon. The arena exists to promote new technologies from companies. Yoo-jin is shocked by his intelligence, since this information isn't public. He thinks it can't be his father because Seung-yeon was a rookie when he first arrived. This means he figured it all out on his own, understanding the true meaning behind the competition. Seung-yeon notices the stare and asks if there's something on his face, but his friend plays it off. So-yeon glances over at Junil's group and seems to make an important decision. Then he tells Seung-yeon it's time to go, leaving the boy completely confused. With a smile, he says thanks, adding that they're now closer to solving the mystery. The scene changes to a hallway, where a voice tells someone to hand over what they agreed on. In front of the restroom, Miju asks why Jun-il is so worked up, and he sighs. She reminds him of their deal, saying he was only supposed to use the Echo Slicer in the fight. He yells that there was nothing he could do, since the weapon went all limp in his hand. Miju stares him down and says he still thinks winning the fight means something here. Then she angrily yells that winning or losing doesn't matter at all in the open class. Suddenly, Woo-jin appears and says this is the one time it's not about winning, but competing. He then asks what the heiress of the Sinseong group is up to behind everyone's back. Miju gets all irritated by his question, puffing out her cheeks and turning her face away. She tries to kick him out, saying it's a private conversation, but he responds with pure mockery. So-yeon reveals he's figured out the deal, trading favors for a recommendation to the Sinseong Guild. Jun-il is outraged by the accusation and yells that he doesn't need to cheat to get a spot. But then he realizes she hadn't mentioned a recommendation, and Miju tells him to shut up. So-yeon celebrates being right and apologizes for thinking she would give him a spot. He then wonders what the real offer was that she used to convince Jun-il. Suddenly it clicks, and he asks who Miju is fighting in the next match. He then guesses it's against So-yeon, and Miju freezes completely upon hearing the name. He reminds Jun-il of the beating he took in the cafeteria, and suddenly it all makes sense. Jun-il stammers, at a loss for words, but Miju furiously yells at him to shut his mouth. Then Woo-jin points to their friends in the audience, who are watching everything with innocent smiles. He asks in a serious tone if the next victim of their plan is going to be So-yeon. At the question, the two of them stand frozen with angry expressions, breaking out in a cold sweat from the tension. From a distance, Seung-yeon watches the whole commotion with a serious and worried look. Miju smirks and says she's sorry to disappoint him with her conclusions. She says he can accuse her all he wants, but all he'll do is hurt her feelings. The girl falls silent for a moment, seeming a bit taken aback by the response. So he takes the opening to ask a direct question, trying to figure things out. He asks what she has against So-yeon, catching Miju off guard. She tries to deny it, saying once again that it's not what he's thinking. But then she reveals it's nothing personal. She just chose an opponent she could crush. And unfortunately for So-yeon, she was by far the easiest target for a guaranteed win. Then she turns the question back on him, wanting to know why he cares so much about the girl. She yells that she saw him sitting next to her, and he replies that she's just a big baby. He realizes he almost said too much, nearly revealing So-yeon's greatest weakness. He gets tired of arguing and walks away, while Miju shouts indignantly at what she heard. As he walks off, he just asks her not to go too hard on the poor thing in the fight. The final taunt leaves Miju absolutely furious, her face red with pure rage. Listening to the whole conversation from a distance, Seungyeon keeps to himself with a very worried look. Seungyeon watches the other students and thinks that he'd be lying if he said he didn't expect this. Now that everyone knows his sister is a returnee, a confrontation with the others is inevitable, but he's very worried, wondering if it had to happen right at this moment. To make matters worse, the fight was against Miju, the powerful daughter of President Sin Seong. He already felt like he had too much to deal with as he watched his opponent sleeping peacefully. Just then, Soyeon calls out to him and says she thought his sister didn't even care about being a hunter. He then suggests that she just give up on everything to avoid any trouble. But Soyeon explains that when Miju finds a victim, she uses everyone like pawns. Seungyeon remembers that she's made many others break down and that he'll never forget what she did. Suddenly, a man approaches and calls the boy over for a private chat in the bleachers. He asks Seungyeon to come down for a minute, leaving the young man and his friend very surprised. The man then reveals that he wants him to join his sister in the arena, leaving him shocked. It's then explained that he'll be there too, as the rules require supervisors for the fight. He says it's to prevent any unforeseen incidents, and Seungyeon remembers when his sister lost control. The instructor ends the conversation by saying that in the end, this will also be good for his sister. Near the arena, Soyeon looks very nervous, wringing her hands with anxiety. Seungyeon sits on the floor and asks if she's sure about this. She stammers that she can do it, that it's nothing. He stares at her with a serious expression, trying to say something to calm his sister down, but she shouts that she'll give it her all and that she won't forget what Subin told her. Seungyeon is confused by her declaration. In a flashback, she thanks Subin for lending her his notes, looking happy and a little flustered. He comments that her handwriting is perfect, saying that the kindest people are always like that, but then he warns her that just being kind isn't enough, and that she also needs to be strong. He says that if they see her as weak, what happened before will just keep happening over and over, and it won't just be bad for her, it will end up affecting everyone around her. Hearing his warning, she remembers her friends and her brother and is struck by the harsh truth. He finishes by saying that if she can't stand up for herself, she won't be able to keep anyone safe. The scene returns to the present, and she thinks that she wishes she could say he was wrong about everything. Then she tells her brother she would die if she saw him or their friends getting hurt because of her. She shouts that she needs to do this for herself, because that's exactly what big sisters do. Seungyeon replies that it's not that she shouldn't try, but that he's very worried about the fight. Then he asks her to throw in the towel if things get ugly, which leaves the girl confused. He explains that this fight isn't worth the risk of her getting hurt, that it's not that serious. With a smile, she thanks him for his concern, happy to have him there looking out for her. Just then, the announcer calls the 8th match of the day, Soyeon-gi versus Miju Shin. The two of them walk to the center of the arena and face off, the air thick with tension. The countdown begins, and Soyeon thanks Miju for choosing her for the duel, but Miju just stares at the ground and scoffs at the idea that this will be a good fight. The fight finally begins. Miju turns with contempt and says it's a joke that she thinks she belongs in the same place as her. The girl is completely confused and apologizes, lost by her opponent's reaction. Miju gets irritated with her demeanor, saying she's tired of the innocent girl act. She continues, saying Soyeon is a real piece of work for thinking no one notices what she's doing. In the crowd, people start to whisper, and Danmo doesn't understand any of this conversation. Soyeon stammers, asking why she's so mean, as a purple energy begins to flow. Then, Miju talks about threads of fate, pulling some keychains toward her with her power. With a squeeze, the purple energy crushes the objects, releasing a dark and intense power. Then she summons a giant creature, saying she will bind her servant to her will. Miju stands beside the monster and declares it's time to end this once and for all. But Soyeon says that she has finally shown her true colors. In the audience, Gangho-oh remarks that it's finally little Miju's turn to fight. Then, Mateo warns that her opponent is a returnee, making the situation tense. Gangho-oh starts to reply, but he suddenly stops, his expression turning serious. His eyes glow red, and he senses a powerful energy coming from somewhere. In the crowd, a mysterious figure in a hat watches everything, emanating a dark aura. He wonders who that guy is and notices the burst of energy the moment their names were called. Mateo asks if he's okay, and Gangho-oh, startled, pulls himself together. He then replies that you'd better believe Miju has a chance to win this fight, and that despite being a returnee, on the inside, she's just a normal teenager. It's revealed that Miju's class is sorceress, and she appears holding a wand. With a confident look, she warns that it might not be pretty, but she always gets it done. Then she runs the wand over her lips and says that first of all, she's going to take a look. Without warning, Miju charges forward and lands a blow that sends her opponent flying across the arena. Soyeon hits the ground hard, and her brother is shocked, unable to believe what he just saw, and the monster doesn't stop coming at Soyeon. The creature then comes down with full force, but Soyeon dodges. Even so, she starts getting hit by shrapnel in the face. Seungyeon doesn't get it, as she should be able to dodge everything with ease. She keeps taking hits without fighting back, wondering why all of this is happening to her. The creature charges again, and Soyeon tries to understand why Miju is being so mean all of a sudden. She then wonders if she did something to make her opponent so angry with her. Several memories flash through her mind, but she can't find a reason for so much hatred. Suddenly, it clicks for the girl, and the creature stops its attack in midair, surprising Miju. Then she yells that she's finally figured it all out and accuses Miju of being jealous of Ujin. The revelation leaves Miju completely speechless, her eyes wide with pure shock. Soyeon says that's why she's being so annoying, but Miju shouts that it's ridiculous. But the girl points out her red face, and at that moment, an unexpected power is activated. In the audience, Subin and his friend watch everything, unable to hear the drama down below. He even comments that he wishes they had microphones, and the other agrees right away. Soyeon then promises to keep it a secret, swearing that no one else will find out. The scene leaves everyone stunned, including Seungyeon and the instructor who were right there. The instructor then states that what happens in the arena stays in the arena, on his honor as a teacher. Soyeon demands that Seungyeon swear as well, and he agrees without caring much. Enraged, Miju yells, "You're dead!" and charges forward with everything she's got. The monster lunges forward and Soyeon dodges. Seungyeon is shocked, noticing that the stuffed animal has suddenly slowed down. The instructor explains that a sorceress's power weakens if their mental focus is broken. On the other hand, he notes that Soyeon hasn't even come close to showing her full power. Her eyes glow with a new intensity, showing that the real fight is about to begin. The scene cuts to a flashback where Jihyung Chai is observing her during a power assessment test. He then congratulates her on the results and explains that she has 4 abilities available at the moment. The first ability is Pisces' Ascension, which allows the girl to levitate freely. Then he lists Aquarius' Explosion and also Leo's Shield to strengthen the body. And last but not least is Sagittarius' Arrow, a piercing attack of immense power. He asks about the other abilities, but she apologizes, as she barely remembers what she's lived through. Soyeon explains that the only thing she knows is that she left many friends behind there. At this, Jihyung comforts her, saying that it's normal and that her memories will come back. He then reflects for a moment and finally realizes which ability will be the most useful. Her feet then begin to float off the ground, glowing with a star-filled aura. The most useful ability, without a doubt, is Pisces' Ascension, which lets her fly high. In the arena, Miju is completely shocked and wonders how the girl is flying. She doesn't understand why Soyeon didn't use this before, as the girl prepares a power. Then, a blast of energy is fired, taking Miju completely by surprise. With Aquarius' Explosion, she hits the creature dead on, causing massive damage. In the audience, everyone's jaw drops, completely shocked by the girl's power. But Miju doesn't give up, and prepares to use a new power with her magic wand. She summons a robot keychain, which grows to a giant size in front of her in the arena. The creature transforms into a metal wall, throwing itself forward to protect Miju from the attack. The energy blast hits the shield head-on, cracking it and kicking up dust. The giant robot begins to fall apart, unable to withstand the pressure of Soyeon's power. Seungyeon is relieved and wonders why he was so worried about his sister. He thinks that with power like that, there's no way anyone can beat Soyeon. But suddenly her energy fades, and her hand drops with no strength left to fight. Seungyeon is completely confused and wonders what's happening to the girl. Soyeon simply stops in the middle of the arena. The blue energy around her vanishes, and she stands there, staring straight ahead. With a malicious grin, Miju realizes she's done it, and that Soyeon is paralyzed with fear. But Soyeon was in trouble, not imagining a giant robot would be so tough. The scene shifts to Miju, who considers destroying the robot but recites a different spell. Seeing this, Soyeon decides to act fast and tries a stronger energy blast. With that, her power surges forward, hitting the mecha with devastating force. The explosion is massive, and Soyeon shields herself from the rising dust. She floats in the air as the smoke clears, revealing a strange scene on the ground. Soyeon looks down and is shocked to see Miju lying there. A heartbeat begins to echo, and the girl on the ground swears she felt something. Soyeon also hears the heartbeat, remembering they said it was impossible to hurt anyone inside. The scene cuts to a red place, showing Jihyung Chai severely injured and on his knees. He's covered in blood and breathing with great difficulty, too weak to get up. Elsewhere, Yunbi starts to panic, wondering if she was the one who did this. Her heart races as she falls into darkness, unwilling to believe what happened. The girl panics, asking herself if she did that, her heart pounding. Suddenly, Soyeon takes a heavy blow. Caught completely off guard by the attack, the impact sends her spinning uncontrollably through the air, flinging her violently toward the ground. She struggles to brace herself on the ground, trying to get up as everything still spins. Just then, a voice speaks to Soyeon, telling her to try and keep up with the fight's pace. It's Miju with a strange smile, warning her it's no time to be daydreaming. Soyeon is speechless at first, unable to understand what's happening, and she sees everyone is fine and wonders if the danger was simply over. Seeing her confusion, Jihyung explains that this is what an illusion mage does. He says that right now, Soyeon is trapped inside an illusion created by Miju. He continues, saying that even a novice knows how to use spells to make weapons invisible. Once you fall for a trick like that, it's almost impossible to escape the danger. But the girl senses something coming and turns her face toward the enemy attack, and So-yeon takes another hit. Miju says you can't fight what you can't see, hitting So-yeon again, and she takes another blow and finally understands what's going on. Then she dodges the attacks, certain she's trapped in an illusion spell. She remembers Ji-young said to attack the caster and creates a shield to protect herself. At this, Ji-young Chai looks worried and comments on the type of magic Miju uses. So-yeon's expression suddenly changes, showing pure terror on her face. He explains that her magic is anything but ordinary. Miju thinks So-yeon sees herself as special, but that will only make things easier. A flashback shows Miju saying they know nothing about returners like her. She warns that even the strongest among them will always have the same weakness. It's explained that they always come home carrying some kind of trauma with them. This memory shows that So-yeon isn't afraid to get her hands dirty, not even with blood. Back in the fight, So-yeon takes another hit, but then a bright glow comes from her hand and a strange symbol begins to appear. With that, she unleashes a blast of power, hitting the illusion's target with full force. Miju smiles confidently, saying she just needs to push the right buttons with her illusions. With that, she will show an infinite loop of her opponent's worst nightmares. So-yeon feels the illusion's impact and covers her mouth, trying to endure the pain. But suddenly, Miju is the one hit by a series of brutal attacks. So-yeon desperately screams Miju's name, not understanding what's happening to her. Danmo is shocked by the scene, while someone jokes that the returner is done for. Seungyeon also tenses up at the violence, unable to believe what he's seeing. One of the students asks Ji-hyung to stop the fight, but he refuses to interfere. He gets angry and asks why not, since the winner seems pretty obvious now. But Ji-hyung just points to the fight and says, the reason is right there in front of them. He explains that his sister may be taking a beating, but she hasn't deactivated her power once. He then tells Seungyeon that if So-yeon hasn't given up, he shouldn't either. Seungyeon is confused by this, trying to understand why his sister is enduring so much. Ji-hyung says he's not the only one with a lot at stake in this open class. For his older sister, the fight is all or nothing to avoid being a burden. That's exactly why she's still holding on and continues to resist amidst the attacks. Seungyeon understands that if he gives up now, he'll only make things worse for his sister. A flashback reveals the girl saying that one day she woke up and was all alone in the world. She said she would die inside if she saw her friends or her brother getting hurt for her. And in anger, she yells in her memory, warning that she needs to do this alone and calls him an idiot. He remembers his own words about how no one can judge another's goal. He even said the fight wasn't that serious, but who was he to tell her to give up? Then, the memory of Shin Baek-gi comes back, who told him to do everything to keep his sister safe. Seungyeon finally understands and turns away, realizing this is his sister's fight. Back in the arena, the situation doesn't look good, and the girl dodges the attacks. She can barely think straight anymore, and wonders what she can do to get out of this. Miju questions her, asking why she's doing this and hurting people. So-yeon thinks that the only thing she ever wanted was to be friends with everyone. Then she screams with all her might to pull herself together, leaving Miju confused by her reaction. At that moment, Ji-hyung Chai holds back Seungyeon, who yells if the story about saving a world was a lie. He continues his outburst, saying he thought he was strong enough to defeat the queen. So-yeon is confused by what she heard, wondering what the queen of leprechauns could be. A memory surfaces in her mind, and she recalls when she met the queen of the fairies. The queen introduces herself as the sovereign and congratulates the girl on reaching her throne. She calls her a small child, and So-yeon thinks that her brother was right all along. She says she admires the little one's courage for seeking an audience, even though she comes from another world. But the sovereign keeps talking, and her tone of voice suddenly seems to change a little. She realizes the girl isn't in any condition to fight her right now, and explains that defeating her in this state would only give her false, misleading hope. Then the queen rises from her throne and opens her cape with an imposing gesture. With just a wave of her hand, she makes a huge banquet appear in front of the girl. The sovereign invites her to sit and enjoy the food made in her honor. The scene shows the enormous tables, separating the queen from little So-yeon at the other end. The girl stays there in silence, unable to tell if it's all a dream, or if it's actually just another one of Miju's illusions meant to deceive her. But then she starts to wonder if it might be one of her own memories. The two begin to eat in silence, not exchanging a single word during the banquet. At this, the queen says her achievement was great, and praises her for her enormous accomplishment. She finishes by saying that no one had ever come so far in all her reign. The queen says she owes a lot to her companions who helped her get there, but now she was alone, and the sovereign asks how she thought she could win without help. With tear-filled eyes, the girl just replies that she doesn't know the answer. The memory of her friends appears, but their faces and names are completely erased for her. She wonders what these names mean, and she tries, but she can't remember. The queen notices and asks if she lost her memories, saying they stole her greatest treasure. So-yeon agrees that everything is lost and cries, saying she's lost too much on this journey. She questions the point of magic and of being strong, admitting she's never been so scared. Crying, she says she's just a child and doesn't understand how she managed to win the first time. She wonders what she did in the past to save that whole world by herself, but the queen reminds her of her words, warning that no being saves a world alone. She explains that the journey had help from the fairies, the rocks, the grass, and her friends. The queen finishes by saying that without their help, her powers would be a joke. With an aura of power, the sovereign states that she is clearly superior to her in every way. As So-yeon's eyes fill with tears, the queen seems to think that perhaps it was by her hands that her world knew true salvation. She explains that what she saw wasn't fairy magic, but a power of the human race. An immense power, unknown in the fairy realm, that changed the world with its charm. The girl is confused and asks what those words really meant. Then, the queen tells her she has already given her the answer she so desperately sought. And as the banquet ends, she orders the girl to show everything she can do. So-yeon asks what she wants to be shown, still confused by the queen's request. The sovereign replies with a smile, saying she wants to see the little girl's magic. Back in the present, she knows it's all fake, but she couldn't help but think that maybe she really is capable of doing all those horrible things she saw. This thought scares her more than anything, and she remembers the queen talking about having help. She looks back and sees the banquet, and realizes the fairy queen was right. Her memories show that she was never alone, and she sees her brother there with Ji-hyung. Maybe with Seung-yeon watching over her, he can stop her if she loses control again. Just thinking about it, a smile of relief and hope finally appears on her face. She smiles warmly, thinking how happy she is to be his older sister. With a determined look, she thanks Seung-yeon, because it was all thanks to him. Now she no longer needs to be afraid, and she dodges the attack with a swift movement. The unexpected reaction leaves Miju, Seung-yeon, and Ji-hyung completely shocked and speechless. Miju is furious that she missed and wonders how she managed to dodge the puppet. It is then explained to us that Miju's illusions, though vivid, had a weakness. Since So-yeon attacked with greater speed, Miju had to use incomplete and weak spells. Because of this, a crucial flaw appeared right in the middle of the illusions she conjured. The girl dodges the attack again, leaving Miju wide-eyed at the scene. This flaw was an imperfect control of sound, which allowed So-yeon to hear the attacks. A weakness that should have been obvious, but fear prevented the victim from keeping their composure. But now the tables had completely turned, and the symbol on her clothing begins to glow. She fires a powerful attack, hitting one of the creatures Miju summoned dead on. Seeing that the fear was gone, Miju realizes that So-yeon has finally discovered her secret, but she scoffs at the situation, saying the girl will hesitate before attacking her. Miju says this is the only opening she needs and begins to recite a new spell. Her eyes glow with power as she tries to trap her opponent in absolute silence. But a giant image of So-yeon appears, with an aura that leaves her completely terrified. A shiver runs down her spine, and she begins to tremble with fear at what she's seeing. The queen's voice echoes, saying that her power is the kind of charm that overcomes fear. Even so, Miju decides to attack, firing a blast of energy at So-yeon. It's because So-yeon now fights with a heart full of courage, and she won't back down anymore. Miju feels like her hand isn't her own, and realizes the statue's hand has been torn off. A blue symbol appears in her eye, and the girl is in shock over what happened. With a determined look, So-yeon gets ready, while Miju watches her from a distance with anger. But then Miju simply announces she gives up, declaring the match over, to everyone's surprise. The official announcement confirms the end of the fight and declares So-yeon-gi the winner. It finally sinks in, and the girl realizes she won the duel. She runs excitedly to her brother, who congratulates her on a job well done. Then she asks if they recorded the fight, but Seung-yeon tells her nobody uses that anymore. With a disappointed look, the girl just says it's a shame there's no video. Suddenly, she collapses from exhaustion in his arms. He calls out her name, scared. The girl passes out completely, sleeping soundly after using up all her energy in the fight. Seung-yeon stands there in silence for a moment, looking at his sleeping sister. Miju says the whole situation was a big joke, and she accuses him of breaking the rules, making the boy furious. She says the duel was hers to win, and she only lost because of his interference. He becomes furious with the accusation and tells Miju to take back what she just said. She asks what she should take back, and he retorts, questioning what kind of duel that was. Seung-yeon says it was supposed to be a training match and asks whoever heard of hurting someone like that. With a threatening gaze, he says she knew the rules and shouldn't have messed with her head. But Miju gives a smirk and says she doubts he would understand. She finishes by saying that nepo babies like him never understand these things. At that moment, Ji-hyung tries to calm the boy down, asking him to take it easy. He warns him not to do anything in front of the crowd, and Miju simply turns and leaves. She walks away thinking she almost had it, that she was so close to winning the fight. But the image of So-yeon and her immense power wouldn't leave her mind. Miju grinds her teeth in anger, admitting the girl showed more grit than she did. But in the end, she thinks it doesn't matter, because the Xinjiang group got what they wanted. And in a way, she also got her chance to show off, even if it wasn't perfect. Thus, she leaves the arena, unaware she'd made a crucial mistake she would come to regret. She had just awakened the fury of someone who is extremely vengeful and protective. He wouldn't rest until he got his revenge, and right there, he swore that Miju would pay for everything. Just then, a very excited Dan Mo arrives and congratulates her friend on the big win. But she says she'll only talk if Soyeon is awake, and he confirms that she passed out. He then asks her to watch over his sister, as he's going to the armory to borrow a weapon. A student scoffs at him, saying maybe he'll find something useful in the armory's trash. Dan Mo asks him to wait and stay to watch Subin and Eugene fight. But the boy slams the door and leaves, and she complains that he acts like the main character. She thinks it's his loss, as she was going to tell him that Subin was holding back on the raft. Then, match number 13 is announced, pitting Subin Seol against Woo Jin-jeon. The scene changes to the armory door, a place filled with high-tech equipment. Inside, he runs into Purium Son, who gets startled and nearly drops the boxes. Seong-yeon says he thought he'd be in class, but explains he came to rent a weapon. He asks what his friend is doing there, and Purium replies that he was also looking for an item. But the boy panics upon learning his opponent is one of the feared returnees. Seong-yeon comments that he never does things the easy way, and Purium just agrees. He mentions that his opponent's weapon is good and asks if his friend knows which sword it is. Purium says yes, because the school doesn't just hand out weapons like that, and he held it last year. At this, Seong-yeon gets excited and asks what weak point he can exploit. He explains that the attack doesn't hit from behind, leaving the user's back vulnerable. Seong-yeon is surprised. He thought the technology would pass through the body without causing harm, but his friend freezes for a second and says the weapons aren't that fancy. He gets irritated and says that's the problem with the school's muscle-bound hunters. Then he freaks out, asking how an attack can pass through someone without hurting them. The boy yells that this isn't a comic book and that engineers don't break the laws of physics. He goes on saying that he should be impressed with the technology inside that sword. With a technical outburst, he threatens Seong-yeon, who admits defeat in the argument. Purium calms down and says that magic engineering is a complex art, like programming. Then, he gets an idea. He thinks the damage-reflecting sword must have rules. He concludes that there might be things the sword can't return to sender, but suddenly he stops walking and shouts Purium's name. Purium turns around, not understanding what he wants now. With a smile on his face, he asks for a favor, saying he needs to pick up a little something. The boy thinks about the proposal for a moment and replies that it shouldn't be too hard to do, but he asks what Seong-yeon is planning, who says he just had a little idea. He wants an advantage to beat a returnee in a fair one-on-one fight, and he also wants to screw over a certain someone, calling it all his grand master plan. Purium is completely lost by the conversation and doesn't understand what's happening. Back in the arena, the countdown begins, with 5 seconds left until the fight starts. At the number 3, Subin gets ready, summoning several energy cubes around him. Eugene gives a sideways smile, confidently waiting for the combat to begin. But out of nowhere, something hits the ground hard, taking Subin completely by surprise. With the shout of, "Fight!" Eugene charges forward with his power, already behind Subin. The scene cuts to minutes before the fight, showing Eugene and Subin getting ready. Then, Subin thanks Eugene for accepting the fight, leaving him confused. Subin explains that he felt like everyone was running from him, since he's number 1. But Eugene says you can't blame them, as everyone just wants an easier day. The boy asks why he chose him, and if it was because he was the last one left. But Eugene replies that there's no such thing as an easy day in the life of a true hunter. He says Subin might have his tricks, but he can take his word for it. And with a serious look, he warns him that he'll find out nothing goes as planned in this line of work. Suddenly, Miju and Seong-yeon start sneezing, and Purium says, "Bless you." Eugene says his motto is not to worry about what he can't predict. He turns his back and says that this is what it means to be a true hunter. The boy reflects on what he heard and remembers Seong-yeon's words about goals. With a smile on his face, Subin replies that he doesn't hate that life philosophy after all. Back at the armory, Purium comments that the fight between the two will please everyone, but he says if he had to bet, he'd put his money on Eugene's victory. Seong-yeon questions his friend's bet, since it's a rookie against a student who was held back a year. With a serious expression, Purium says that normally, it wouldn't be wrong to doubt a student who was held back, but he adds that there are exceptions to absolutely every rule. Then he reveals that Eugene was only held back because of all his disciplinary warnings, and if he weren't such a trouble magnet, things would have been very different. He definitely would have been the best sentinel among all the second-year students. With a powerful kick, Eugene rushes forward, catching Subin by surprise with his speed, but Subin manages to block the attack at the last second. Then, the white-haired boy defends himself, using one of his elemental energy cubes. Dan Mo is in shock and yells that he managed to block the hit. It's explained to us that the question wasn't how he saw it, because he actually didn't. In reality, Subin had no idea where Eugene's attack would come from. What he had was a horde of spirits, which makes it difficult to track a sentinel in combat. But that hardly mattered to Subin, who, unlike a mage, has a crucial advantage. The spirits have minds of their own, and that's the great advantage he possesses. A mage controls puppets, but he trains the spirits to obey his commands. So, with trained spirits, sometimes he just needs to let them do the work. But the cube begins to crack, and Subin is on alert from the force of the blow. The shield shatters, and suddenly, the sound of a gear echoes, and a water aura envelops Yu-Jin. With that, a pillar of water shoots up, nearly hitting Yu-Jin straight in the face. Yu-Jin dodges, but ends up with a small scratch on his cheek. The girls in the crowd comment that he's totally different from that night on the ferry. Subin feels that everything he throws seems much sharper than before. Then, Yu-Jin prepares for the next attack, creating several water spheres around him. He fires a sequence of water attacks that rush straight at Subin. The boy dodges, and suddenly a blast of water comes his way. With a quick move, Yu-Jin defends himself from the blast, and Yu-Jin notices his arm cracking, but Yu-Jin just grunts, not seeming the least bit intimidated by his defense. Yu-Jin moves in, and with a powerful blow, he shatters the shield, breaking through his opponent's defense. In the crowd, the girls eat popcorn and comment that another one has hit the dust. Subin dodges by a hair's breadth and uses his spirits to defend against the attacks. Through the broken shield, Yu-Jin gives a sinister smile, seeming to enjoy the fight. It's explained that despite the spirits protecting him, there's a way to deal with them. The solution is to simply destroy everything until there's nothing left in the way. For him, strategies are worthless, as brute force can solve any problem. In his world, it's very simple. Either you're strong enough to win, or you're not. He breathes heavily and compliments the rookie, saying it's no wonder he's number one. Then he asks what's next, as he knows he still has one last spirit. Subin warns with a dark look, telling him to remember he's the one who asked for this. He says he didn't want to play this way, but Yu-Jin left him no other choice. Then he summons not one, but two elemental spirits, one in each of his hands. The revelation catches Yu-Jin by surprise, as he still had two spirits left to fight, stunning everyone in the audience. Outraged, he shouts that it can't be, and rushes at his opponent with everything he's got. Subin orders the Great Torrent to advance. The explosion is gigantic, and Yu-Jin wonders if the place has turned into a water park. He yells that Subin is a huge show-off, and that he was already impressive before, but he admits the kid is a lot more trouble than he initially expected. That's because the spirit mage Subin Seol was, in fact, an extremely rare and powerful S-rank. It all starts underwater. Yu-Jin John opens his eyes, completely confused. He finds himself floating alone, surrounded by a huge school of fish. He wonders where he is, maybe in the middle of the ocean. Suddenly, a very friendly-looking dolphin appears right in front of him, making a little noise. Yu-Jin gets scared, questioning if that thing is really a dolphin. He tries to understand what the creature is saying, calling him buddy, but the dolphin's expression changes, and it tells Yu-Jin to get a grip, because they're not friends. The young man is completely shocked, unable to believe a dolphin just spoke to him. Just then, a safety device activates, and his suit begins to change. An oxygen helmet appears to keep him from drowning right there. The system announces that when the oxygen runs out, student Yu-Jin John will lose the match. He feels relieved for taking a deep breath before the arena flooded. And speaking of the arena, a giant cube of water forms in the middle of the place. On the other side, Subin faces him, looking completely calm. It's explained that Subin has a pact with water spirits, allowing him to fight as if he were on land. But for Yu-Jin, the situation was completely different. He was at a clear disadvantage. With great effort, he tries to move forward, but the water pressure is too strong. For Yu-Jin, just trying to get close to his opponent already seemed like an impossible task. The flooded arena became the perfect stage for Subin to control the fight as he wished. It was a flawless checkmate, as Yu-Jin couldn't use his full strength in there. Yu-Jin understands that his opponent was just testing the waters before going all out. He thinks he would have lost without even showing his skills if Subin had gone all out from the start. With a mocking look, Subin watches his enemy, finding him very kind for waiting. He analyzes that the area is enclosed, and Yu-Jin has nowhere to swim to escape. With a glint in his eye, he's sure victory is his if he maintains the flood. In the audience, the other Yu-Jin's jaw drops, impressed by what she sees. Seung-yeon is also shocked, wondering what kind of biblical tsunami this is. He admits he knew Subin had a few tricks up his sleeve, but he never imagined something this incredible. He concludes this is on another level, with Subin displaying a sinister aura. In the arena, Yu-Jin is sweating, but he seems very focused on something. At this, the audience begins to whisper, wondering why he's just stalling for time. Seung-yeon is also curious, wanting to know what Yu-Jin is up to in there. But suddenly, upon seeing the fighter's expression, his eyes widen in shock. Seung-yeon shouts, saying there's no way he's about to do that. He then grabs So-yeon, warning her that they need to get out of there immediately. Desperately, he yells for everyone to hurry up and run. Meanwhile, Yu-Jin lowers his head, concentrating as a strange energy gathers around him. Subin smirks, admitting he has to hand it to the rookie. He thinks this is what he gets for underestimating a freshman, but there's a catch, because Yu-Jin warns that sentinels also have their own tricks up their sleeves. An absurd amount of energy explodes, causing everyone in the broadcast room to panic. Ji-hyung yells, asking what the hell Yu-Jin John thinks he's doing. Desperate, Ji-hyung shouts at Subin to deactivate his ability right now. Subin is confused, wondering why the order is for him to stop. But Ujin smirks, thinking that it's actually Subin who should give up. The scene changes, and it's explained that every physical object has its own natural frequency. If that object is exposed to a vibration at the same frequency, it will begin to shake uncontrollably. The water arena begins to tremble until it finally shatters into pieces. Ujin warns that Subin doesn't know him, as his hands vibrate with full power. At this, Subin panics as he realizes what's about to happen. Ujin faces his opponent, warning that the barrier is nothing more than a wall for him to destroy. This phenomenon is something known among the awakened, an incredible and dangerous power. It's resonance, and with a deafening noise, the water barrier explodes into 1,000 pieces. The water crashes down on the audience, leaving everyone confused and completely drenched. The other Ujin is amused by the situation, giving a little wink as the water falls. She is mesmerized by the beauty of the water droplets falling around her. Everyone looks up, as the sight of the droplets sparkling in the air is beautiful. In the middle of the wet arena, Subin lies on the ground, completely shocked by what happened. Ujin calmly approaches him and compliments the trick his opponent used. He then smiles, saying Subin must be out of mana, which guarantees him a flawless victory. But Jihyung interrupts him, helping Subin up and declaring that the victory is actually his. He yells that Ujin was disqualified for destroying school property, with Subin saying he's never heard of that rule. Jihyung curses at Ujin for nearly drowning everyone. Sungyun realizes what the veteran Ujin is made of, and the reason for his reputation. With the arena in pieces, it's no surprise he was held back for bad behavior. Luckily, the water in the arena evaporated, allowing the competition to continue as normal. Jihyung announces that the next fight is between Sungyun-gi and Yona Io. In the crowd, his sister Soyeon cheers loudly, shouting that he's going to win. But the other students whisper, wondering what he was thinking challenging a senior. They laugh, saying that Sungyun picked the wrong person to start a fight with. At that moment, Subin asks who the girl is, and Pureum is shocked that he doesn't know her. Pureum explains that despite her calm appearance, she's the wildest one there. He says she went crazy at the end of last year, blowing up an entire building by herself. Subin's jaw drops, wondering what the hell Sungyun was thinking. He thinks that the guy was never very smart, recalling his many failures, but he believed Sungyun had at least one working brain cell to not do something stupid. Now, all he can do is hope, begging that Sungyun has some kind of plan to win. Then the system's voice asks the competitors to present their chosen weapons. Sungyun faces his opponent and says he needs to be completely honest before they start. He reveals that she isn't the only one there with a red mist, shocking everyone. Jihyung wonders what he's talking about, while Sungyun explains that he's done his homework. He reveals that, with a friend's help, he got the same weapon his opponent uses. Then he asks, in a very mocking tone, if that's enough for a fair fight. Jihyung is shocked, wondering how he got a red mist with the current economy. But he thinks that even without powers, Yona survived deadly situations in another dimension. With that, the system begins to scan the weapons chosen by the two competitors. The bags with the weapons are placed on a conveyor belt, and the item registration begins. The two approach the belt, watching the equipment as the registration is carried out. Sungyun touches a chain, which reacts with a bluish glow of energy. The registration is complete, so Sungyun gets ready to grab his weapon. He starts to open the bag, leaving Yona a little confused by the situation. With 20 seconds left, they both take their positions in the arena, ready for the fight to begin. His weapon is the Red Mist, a sword that fires arcs of energy. As for Yona's, it's the Echo Shredder, a sword with the power to reflect damage. The crowd is in shock, completely surprised by the ability of the senior's weapon. Ujin-jan is stunned, wondering why the Echo Shredder has appeared again. Coach Gangho feels that something is very wrong, as the company wouldn't use the same weapon. Miju is startled, immediately saying it wasn't her fault. At that, she goes after Ju Young, who swears up and down he didn't give the weapon to Yona. He gets all nervous, admitting that he did lend the sword, but to someone else. The scene cuts to a flashback, with Sungyun approaching the senior who was sitting there. He shamelessly asks if he can borrow the fancy sword for a bit, but Sungyun throws it in his face that he heard him complaining about not being able to show off the sword. With that, he proposes a deal that would be a win-win situation for both of them. He explains that if he wins, the weapon becomes famous, but if he loses, the blame will be all his. And as a bonus, it could also help the senior get out of trouble with Miju. He finishes by saying the guy has nothing to lose and asks if he accepts the deal. And just like that, using his smooth talk, he got the sword and went to talk to his friend. He then asks Pureum to get him a weapon bag exactly like Yeona's. The scene returns to the present, showing the weapon registration, which now makes perfect sense. During the registration, Sungyun takes the chance to use his magic chain. The plan was actually quite simple, just swap the two bags without anyone noticing. With that, back in the present, Yona wields the sword she thinks is hers. In the audience, Subin understands the swap, but he can't figure out the plan. Jihyung thinks that if he was going to cheat, it would have been better to swap it for a toy sword. That would force Yona to use her powers, and then his chains would have had a chance. The countdown to the fight begins, and Sungyun notices the senior is very angry, but he justifies it to himself since being an F rank, he needs to use everything he's got to win. He then remembers his father, asking him to do his best in the fight. As the battle begins, his eye glows with an intense blue determination. Without wasting time, he launches a powerful arc of red energy at his opponent, but Yona defends herself effortlessly, blocking the attack with her sword. Her weapon's power reflects the blow, which comes right back at him with full force. With that, Seungyeon is almost hit head-on by his own energy attack. Ji-hyung doesn't get the plan, since she just threw the attack right back in his face. Even wounded, he admits his opponent is much faster than he imagined, but he says she's not that hard to read and charges in with everything he's got. In the crowd, Subin doesn't understand the logic of closing the distance with a long-range weapon. The two exchange fierce blows, their swords clashing with a metallic sound. Then, Seungyeon spins and attacks again, but this time the strike is different. Yona tries to block the attack, but she's surprised by what happens. The physical attack hits her arm dead on, but it's repelled by an energy. The audience and the commentators are in shock, unable to believe what they just saw. Yujin shouts, wondering why she couldn't deflect the energy arc. Danmo is also confused, as the physical attack simply ricocheted off her arm. With this, Subin realizes the genius of the plan and understands that Seungyeon figured it all out. This might be the first time in history that a mere F rank has landed a hit on a senior. His sword falls to the ground, but a chain pulls it back to his hand. Seungyeon warns, one arm down, now for the other. The scene changes, showing Juyong Lee thinking that it's that time of year again. He stares at the portal, saying he knows Seungyeon well and his hidden potential. The kid definitely has something special, a quality that isn't easy to spot, but it's a talent that isn't obvious. It's something that needs to be revealed. Juyong then thinks the moment of truth has arrived. It's now or never for the kid. He encourages Seungyeon to show everyone what he's really made of. Back to the fight, the two face off, swords ready for the next attack. The blades clash with a red glint as Yeona forcefully blocks the blow. Seungyeon attacks again, with an arc of energy that cuts through the arena's air. Pureum notices she couldn't parry the attack, and Ji-hyung understands there's a reason for it. It's revealed that Seungyeon is using reverse engineering to understand how the weapon works. He grits his teeth, remembering he knew there was something strange about that sword, because the Echo Slasher went limp as a noodle when Dan Mo hit it with her spoon. With that, he recalls that magic engineering has a mechanism, a specification for everything, and he finally understands that the weapon has a system of rules, like a code. It's explained that no two awakened powers are exactly the same. Each has its own rules. That's why creating a weapon that works against all powers is something straight out of a comic book fantasy. Whoever created the Echo Slasher worked with two limitations: reality and their own imagination. He starts to break down the weapon's logic, which absorbs impact and releases it in the opposite direction. It's a very simple programming logic, working just like a Uno reverse card. With the plan in mind, he charges forward again, rushing at his opponent with everything he's got. Yona braces for impact, her gaze fixed and her sword in a defensive stance. He says this makes everything much easier and swings his chain with a blue glow. All he needs to do is time the clash of the swords perfectly, and right at the moment of impact, he needs to release an arc of energy with full force. But the big trick to the plan is that the attack has to be aimed at himself. That way, the sword will absorb the arc and spit the energy back in Yona's direction. The plan works perfectly, and the attack is reflected with full force back at the weapon's user. With the impact, both are thrown back, landing hard on the arena floor. In the audience, Dan Mo and her friend are completely shocked by the fight's outcome. He remembers a crucial moment, and with his eye glowing, he yells that it's not over yet. Then he charges forward with everything, not giving his opponent a single second to breathe. With a swift strike, he attacks again, forcing Yona to defend herself. He knows the power difference. After all, she's a veteran, and he's just an F rank. He always knew she was a monster, from the time his sister was in the hospital. That's why he needs to end the fight before she uses her strength to turn the tables. He focuses on his goal, because the only thing that matters right now is precision. The plan only works if he gets the timing of the touch exactly right, otherwise it's over for him. The swords clash once more, the sound of metal echoing throughout the arena. He remembers moments from the past and tells himself to stay focused on the fight. Energy explodes around him, because for him, failure was never an option. He recalls the lonely times, when he was cast aside by everyone around him. Because of everything he's been through, he has to win this fight, no matter the cost. The image of his father comes to mind, an important figure who motivates him. With a furious shout, he erupts, needing to prove his true worth. Ji-hyung Chai watches the fight, and upon seeing the red energy, he finally understands the plan. He remembers a scene of pure destruction caused by that same red energy from before. With a relieved smile, He thinks to himself that he knew he saw something special in that kid. Jin Hagiwara realizes that the weapon meant to protect Yeona has now become her greatest weakness in this fight. Unless Xunyan's plan was precisely to force her to use her powers constantly. In the audience, even Subin is shocked, watching the fight with wide eyes. Xunyan's eye glows with a blue light. Subin realizes that look is the same as Xunyan's father's. Dan Mo excitedly calls out to Soyeon, saying her brother is absolutely crushing it. She starts to say that he might even be able to win, but stops mid-sentence. Because she notices that Soyeon doesn't look happy at all, but rather very worried about him. The boy's sister gets serious, wondering what the hell is happening to Xunyan. She doesn't understand why, but her brother looks very sad. And Yeona begins to recite a strange incantation. Xunyan throws himself back, startled, and Ji-hyung realizes that he has now crossed the line and made a huge mistake. Yeona Eo, the regressor, revealing her true and terrifying form. The scene flashes back to Seong-yeon explaining his plan to his friend. Pareum is confused, as he doesn't understand how forcing Yeona to use her powers guarantees victory. He sums up the plan, saying that Seong-yeon wants to beat a regressor and screw someone over at the same time. Then, he asks who the other person his friend is trying to screw over in the process is. Seong-yeon just gives a mysterious, knowing smirk. Back at the fight, Gang Ho-oh calls out Mateo's name. Mateo turns around, startled, not understanding what's going on. Gang Ho-oh warns him that they need to stop this fight right now. Mateo is speechless, while the other man seems furious with the situation. He yells that the regressor is using a prototype sword that hasn't even been released to the market yet. To make matters worse, she shouldn't even have the weapon, and now she's embarrassing herself in front of everyone. Mateo turns pale as he realizes that half the hunters in the country are watching everything live. In the midst of the shouting, Gang Ho-oh's phone starts ringing, making him even more annoyed. On the other end of the line, Miju ironically asks if they're having fun at the company's expense. She then explodes, screaming at them to stop this horror show immediately. On the phone, the man despairs, saying that if the regressor loses, the company will go bankrupt. But Miju hangs up on him without a second thought. Filled with anger and frustration, she clutches her phone, lamenting that it's too late to do anything now. It's revealed that she practically begged her father to handle this product presentation. Now she's desperate, because if he finds out about her screw-up, it'll all go down the drain. Just then, she remembers Seong-yeon, and her eyes fill with pure fury and understanding. She wonders if this was his plan all along, but doubts that Moron would be that smart, because if he just wanted to win, he would have switched the sword for any other, not the Ripper. Sitting at a game board, she finally realizes that Seong-yeon-gi is a treacherous snake. She understands his move, feeling like an idiot for being so easily fooled by him. Elsewhere, Mateo asks his boss what the plan is to stop the match now. Gang Ho-oh says he knows the building and could even burn the whole place down. Mateo turns pale with fear, asking if the veteran is serious about setting everything on fire. He thinks that's crossing a line, even for the people at the corporation. Gang Ho-oh glares at him, asking since when they've ever cared about limits. Yeona unleashes all her power at once. Seong-yeon throws himself back, startled, preparing for Yeona's attack, and Seong-yeon realizes she's coming at him with everything she's got. She remembers that this isn't her first battle, and that she's been through a lot. With a threatening look, the regressor tells Seong-yeon to keep his eyes wide open. He grits his teeth, knowing he absolutely cannot let this attack hit him. But to his surprise, the strike never comes, leaving him completely confused and shocked. In the audience, Ujin-jeon also has no idea what's happening. Dan Mo wonders what's gotten into her, as Yeona just stopped in the middle of the fight. She continues to gather energy but doesn't launch the attack, creating a tense atmosphere. The crowd is confused, wondering if this is some kind of cliffhanger. Seong-yeon starts to break out in a cold sweat, realizing there was something he hadn't considered. He thinks about all the time he spent with his sister, and why he thought Yeona would be any different. He questions why he assumed she could use her powers but just didn't want to. And then he understands that she's just as afraid of her powers as his sister was, and he feels like scum. The scene shifts to a flashback, where a man asks if she doesn't speak because she doesn't want to, or because she can't. He approaches Yeona, who was sitting there on a bench looking sad with her head down. Then he says it's funny, because those who go to another world never have trouble communicating. It's as if a special power instantly translates everything they hear and say. This made him think that the god who sends them there didn't want them to feel lonely, but he thinks that power must have malfunctioned on her way back to her world. He then asks if that's why she can now only speak the language of the other world. Yeona says something back, but in that strange language that no one can understand. Seeing that it wasn't going to work, he suggests they try something else. He invites her to a school with others like her, extending a hand to help. He explains that there are other ways to understand each other, even without saying a word. And so, she arrives at the Seonghan Academy for the Gifted, a completely new place. The man then welcomes her as she looks a bit lost in the school hallway. He tells her that she'll find many other students there who are just like her. With that, a glimmer of hope appears in her eyes as she sees the other students. A flashback tells us that Yona was known for being the wildest of the regressors. It's explained that at the end of last year, she completely lost her mind and went berserk. She single-handedly blew up an entire building with no help from anyone. But afterward, she seemed utterly terrified by what she had just done. No one could communicate with her. It was like she was trapped in her own world. Then, a mysterious man found her in the middle of all that mess and destruction. To other people, she barely looked human, with such a frightening and out-of-control power. Meanwhile, Gang Ho-Oh asks Mateo what a hunter needs most to survive. He then tells him not to let the rules get in the way of common sense in a tight spot. The scene cuts back to Seungyeon, who understands that he shouldn't be bound by any limits. Back in the fight, Yona is crying, afraid of her own dangerous, uncontrolled power. But Seungyeon realizes this isn't right. This wasn't how he wanted to fight. Then, in an unexpected move, he simply throws his sword away onto the arena floor. He thinks he should have known from the start that she was scared the whole time. Winning like this would just make him look like a dirty cheater, not a real victor, and it would leave a bitter taste in his mouth, reminding him of his sister. On top of that, he thinks about everything Ji-hyung said and makes a decision. Suddenly, he gets angry and yells that he's had enough of all this stalling. He screams that he hates his own powers too, and asks if they're going to fight or not. He remembers that there are other ways to understand people, and without a word, Yona seems to finally understand what he meant. With that, the red energy in her arm slowly begins to fade. Time is running out, and the announcer says there's 1 minute left in the match. Then Yona rushes toward him, determined to fight using her powers.